October 18th, 2021. Application number 21-002. Applicant Mark and Karen Murdoch, doing business as Worthington Vineyards, LLC. Owner of Summers Mountain Properties, LLC. 359 Mountain Road, Summers, seeking a special use permit for a farm, vineyard, and winery pursuant to section 6.12 of the Summers zoning regulation to allow an operation of a tasting room in the sale of wine for consumption on and off premise. Do I need to read? This is a new legal notice?
Yes.
For the record, I'm going to read in the legal notice. The Town of Summers Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on Monday, December 13th, 2021 at 6 p.m. at the Town Hall Auditorium, 600 Main Street, Summers, to receive public comments on the following. Application number 21-002, applicant Mark and Karen Murdoch, doing business as Worthington Vineyards, LLC, owner of Summers Mountain Properties, LLC, 359 Mountain Road, Summers, seeking a special use permit for a farm, vineyard, and winery pursuant to section 2.12 of the Summers zoning regulation to allow for the operation of a tasting room in the sale of wine for consumption on and off the property. Said applications are on file in the land use office, the Town of Summers, Summers Town Hall. At this hearing, interested persons may be heard and written communication received, dated Summers, Connecticut, the 23rd day of November 2021. This was published on December 2nd and December 10th of 2021. So the public hearing is officially opened at 6:07.
Mark Murdoch?
Yes, Mark.
Since our last meeting, we have some new exhibits to introduce, I guess, from the part of the record.
Okay.
You'll hear from Jay Ussery as far as the site plan and A2 survey. Original application, we did have a map plan, but it was, your request was for a full A2 survey, so we had that completed. Second, you're going to see a traffic study. Again, we didn't think that was necessary, but at the request of the zoning officer, we have them done.
Okay,
And
thank
so
you.
you'll see that today. Since over the course of events of the next few months, we've had the Department of Consumer Protection has had a hearing at the because the opposers appealed the award of a liquor permit. And since that time, we've had a hearing and a number of decisions. And I want to introduce an exhibit that the state has denied all requests for appeal and reconsideration. And we have now a full permit from the state.
Do you have a copy of that, Jennifer? This is it. You just.
Yeah. So here's all the
Okay.
records for that.
Just so you know that, George Schober for the record, that decision can be appealed.
Can we just wait till we?
Yeah,
Because they're
sure.
Yeah. Well,
We'll mark
you
this
can mark it
exhibit L.
received.
Exhibit L?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. What was K?
The updated application.
Okay.
I guess if it needed to be marked, I marked that K.
So I guess we're gonna hear from the
So at this
applicant.
point,
Yeah.
let's go to the
Jay.
JSU.
Good evening. For the record, J.R. Russo here representing Summers Mountain Properties and the Murdochs with regard to their special permit application. They came to us a few weeks back asking for a survey of the property, an A2 survey, which is required in your regulations to accompany an application for special use permit, which we completed and we have submitted. We also are showing you an existing conditions plan, basically showing you what's at the current location that's owned by the Summers Mountain Properties, as well as some proposed future improvements, which was my understanding that earlier on, before I was involved here with this app, the commission was interested in seeing what some of the future improvements might be on the property. So that's also included in the plan set that you have before you, and I've got one up here that I'm going to try and walk you through. I just want to make sure, can everybody see this okay? You know, it's kind of hard sometimes. We got a variety of folks here in different locations, and I always tend to be able to step right in front of the whole thing and block it at some point. So just yell if I do that, because I'm pretty good at it. So to start with, one of the plans that I thought might be helpful here to take a look at is an overview or an aerial showing the farm and the area around the farm, just to get a feel for where we are. So this is an aerial, I believe it's a 2019 that we picked up on Google, and we've added the features to it, done some annotations so that we can kind of see what's going on. So let me kind of walk you through this so we can see where we are. So if you take a look at this, and you'll note that all the way to the right is Mountain Road over here at this particular location. Summers Mountain Properties here is the 87 or 88 acre parcel. Summers Mountain also owns the parcels adjoining us here along Mountain Road that are to the, essentially to the south of the particular site. And the driveway entryway into the property is located right here coming off of Mountain Road. So as you come in, and you drive up the driveway, and I'm sure everybody's been here, so they're kind of familiar with it, but as we drive in here, we come through the gate. The warming house is located right here. The sugar house and current winery is located right over here. And then as we come down and we come through, we've got a pond and a pond. We've got a covered bridge. We've got the large pond that's over here. We've got a hayfield in this location right here. We've got some parking area that's located up here. And we've got the area here, which is a graveled area that we're showing a proposed 60 by 30 tent, seasonal tent that would be located there during the warmer weather months. So that's kind of an overview of the total property. Most of the improvements pretty much end at this location. Improvements here forward, here, the remaining part of the farm. This is the sugar bush that Dan Roulier operated for a number of years on the parcel, collecting sap in the late winter, early spring, and refining it over here at the sugar house and making maple syrup. He also had this all fenced in, and he had cows in here for quite a few years, probably up until the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, I'm not sure when the cows left. And the hayfield was here, which I think is still being hayed today. What the Murdochs wanted me to show you, though, and with the overview, is to try to go out a little further. The property that they own here is currently a vineyard, and you can actually see, if you look at it closely, you can see the rows of the grapevines that's located here. There's also a vineyard on their property that's here. And they're proposing in the future another vineyard out in this location and another one over here in this particular location. So there will be some expansion of the facility once that's done. As we get a little further into the application for some potential future improvements, we're going to talk a little bit about a building that could go here and replace the tent. And when that does happen, the plan would be that all of the actual winery production would take place in that building, and then the sugar house would become vacant again. The sugar bush will go back into production, and they will continue to make maple syrup there, as Dan earlier did for a number of years. So in terms of looking at abutting owners again, they own the properties here that abut us along Mountain Road and are part of the farm here, and there is obviously vineyards there. Town of Summers, the former Camp Iapo, is located here to the right. To the back is Przanowski, which they wrap around this, and I think I want to say go all the way out to Root Road, if I'm not mistaken, over behind Bruce Wood's former gravel pit. I think that's where their house is, and then it wraps all the way around the side here. And then GM Learer is located over here to the west. He wraps back around the backside of the pond and over here. His driveway comes off a mountain road, I don't know, somewhere down in this location. I don't remember exactly. Kind of near where the brook crosses, as I recall, is where his driveway winds up into the back where his house is located. So that gives you kind of an overview and an aerial look at the entire property. The next page in the data set is simply the A2 boundary survey that's required in your regulations in terms of a submission with an application, and that's what's shown here. It's 87.9 acres. Roadway, again, out here to the right. Pond here, which is the property line. So there's really not anything shown on this other than strictly the property itself. The next page is an existing conditions of essentially the front portion, I'm going to call it, or the southerly portion of the property, which shows, again, Mountain Road out here, the driveway coming in, we come in through the gate. We've got, again, the warming house located here, sugar house here, and current winery location. The various roadways and driveways that are located on the property. The gravel area where Dan Rulier had his tent when he was there operating, which we're going to show you on the next page, a proposed location for a seasonal tent. Again, the ponds, two ponds located here, the larger pond located over here to the west. And again, this is just showing you the existing conditions on the property itself. So at this point, I'm going to go to our next plan, which is going to show, again, the driveway coming through, essentially the southerly half of the property, the tasting room, and warming house. So right now the first floor, or the plan is the first floor of the warming house will be used for tasting, and as well as the proposed tent during the warmer weather months. And when we take a look at your zoning requirements in terms of parking, and we look at the potential occupancy for each one of these, and we put a zoning or data, or parking data table down here for you to take a look at, and we look at those calculations. It's based on one space for every 3 occupants, and we're looking at a total of 36 occupants at the tent, and the tasting room at the warming house is another 30, for a total of 66, which will require us to provide 22 spaces in total, including some handicap spaces. So we're showing 2 handicaps over here on the paved area right in front of the warming house, with the remaining spaces being located in the gravel parking area out here to the east. So there's ample room to provide the parking that's required in your regulation without doing any additional, I guess what we would call construction, or what you might need in order to provide parking. The areas are already there. I think Dan really used this gravel area up here when he was utilizing the facility for parking, and there's plenty of room there to provide the parking that's required for the operation. Another thing to note in terms of sanitary facilities, there are bathrooms that are located in here, and there is a toilet room, which I guess is, I don't know that I would necessarily call it portable, although it looks like it when you go out here, but it's located here. I think it's permanently affixed. This is handicap accessible. There is a septic tank here, and everything winds back around, and there's a leach field that covers all of this. And I'm going to have to go back a sheet to show you what that is. The leach field for both of these is located right over here. And this is information that we got from the design plans that was done back when Dan developed this originally. I want to say Mike Mako did it. Steve Jacobs has got all these records in his office. And I believe Steve has reviewed this in terms of its ability to handle the number of people that are being proposed here. And you probably have a memo, I think, in your packet from Steve indicating that he's taken a look at it. Doesn't have any issue in terms of the capacity of the system to be able to accommodate what the Murdochs are proposing here in terms of occupancy. So, which would include right now the temporary seasonal tent and the tasting room for a total of occupancy of about 66 people. So now let's go to the next sheet and look at potential future uses which, should this be approved and everything goes well for the Murdochs, their intent would be that the business is going to do okay, and at some point in time we'd like to put a building here. And I think in the original application you probably had some plans that were done by Jack Kemper of Kemper Associates that showed you a floor plan and I think some elevations of this particular building. The tasting portion would be located in this part of the building, and then I'm going to call it the nuts and bolts, if you will, is actually in the larger section over here, which would become the winery when this is built. So the wine production would take place here, tasting room here. The existing winery here would go back to the sugar house use in the production of maple syrup. When this is built, we will bring in a new access drive off of the paved driveway here and bring it down. We'll have handicap parking right here for this particular location, as well as some type of a loading area where small trucks can come in and out to bring supplies into the facility. So, and as well as emergency vehicles to be able to get in and out to this particular area. So that would be a potential future use, and again, timing on that I'm really not sure of, and I'm not sure that the Murdochs are really sure of at this point in time, since it's basically a new endeavor. But I guess if all the stars align and everything was great, maybe it'd be a couple of years down the road, but maybe it's 5 years down the road. And when it does happen, it's going to obviously require a little more detail on our end and their end, and we'd be back to you probably with an updated plan or modification of the plan to show you exactly where this is going to go and what it's going to look like. But at some point in the future, that would be the plan, to be able to put something like this together. So that is a basic overview of the plan set that you have that accompanies the application. It's pretty straightforward and what I would call simple at this point, because there's really not a lot of change over what's there right now in terms of, the startup and the initial use of the property. It's essentially utilizing, the warming house as a tasting room to get started, and during the warmer weather months, again, going back, the addition of a 60 by 30 seasonal tent that would be down here on an existing stone or gravel pad that he earlier had used when he was there. So that's, again, just a basic overview of it. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
An updated plan versus this small plan here where it says the tent is 3,200 square feet, which is 40 by 80 and not 60 by 30.
There is an updated plan that we submitted.
And you weren't at the last meeting,
I was.
Yeah.
were you?
Yeah.
Oh, it came after.
We were all at the
Is
last
it
meeting.
it's smaller now,
Do you
right?
need?
No, I just had this
So
one.
what-
That's
You
all.
brought, whatever you brought was the old one.
Okay,
We got a new one last week.
that's okay.
Sorry.
No problem.
So the new one,
They were on the table.
it's 30 by 60.
The new one is 3060. It's 1,800 square feet, so it's smaller. I
Yep.
think the other one was 80 by 40, which was 3,200, so we
Yes.
did make it smaller.
So
What are the approximate measurements of the
building.
future building?
Future building, and overall.
I mean, we're not approving any
No, we're not.
future buildings at this point, though. Just curious.
Just bear with me here 1 second. Let me get a scale. So the
Between 75, 5.
winery area itself where the production would be is approximately 64 by 30. And then the area of the tasting, which includes some office area and obviously a bathroom facility, is about 64 by 30 again. So essentially about the same as this. So in terms of the, the occupancy of that, we did do a rough calculation, again, based on this and the tasting occupancy here. And it doesn't change a whole lot. We're up to about 76 people, a few more parking spaces, which again, we have room for, which we're showing up here. But the amount of space within the actual building itself, when you take out the toilet facilities, there's some office space. There is obviously tasting room space, but there's not a lot, so it doesn't change a whole lot over what it was with the seasonal tent, to be honest. But what it does do is it gives them a permanent facility here to actually make the wine.
And tasting.
Correct.
Which initially is supposed to be in the sugar
Yeah,
shack.
yeah.
And warming house.
Up in the warming house. Right. And the sugar house up here is used right now for the actual production of the wine.
So with that's the proposed building is like where the tent would be.
Correct.
The temporary tent. So the tent would
Correct.
go
That
away
would-
and then they would build this building.
Correct.
So, in terms of like seating layout and how many people can fit in a tent that large, can you give us a sense of how many people could fit in a reception style setting?
213 it says here.
I know, I'm surprised.
For the.
So here we were looking at, we were looking at 30 occupants in here within the tent area, the 30 by 60. So there would be an actual tasting facility, in other words, or a temporary bar where you would come up and purchase, whatever you might like, and then there would be tables set up within this area as well. So it would accommodate about 30 people.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a number of questions when the commission's done.
Only a calculation on the original was one occupant for 15 square feet, and out
Yep.
here it's,
So that was what Tim Kuhn came up with in our office, using 15 square feet per person, and in conversations with the Murdochs, they think that they will never be able to fit that many people in there. And although they probably would love to have that many people, they don't feel that that's a realistic number, so we reduced it.
but it's supposed to be based on the capacity of the building, not what you feel you're gonna have, right?
Right, which we didn't account for the actual tasting bar within the area itself. We were just looking at how many people could fit under the roof.
Still 15 square feet is a rather large space for a person to occupy.
What's that?
15 square feet's pretty adequate space for a person.
That would be like banquet style seating, and that wouldn't be what we would do for a tasting room. We really spacing people out, because that's the intent of the facility, is to space people out. So you would be nowhere near that. And the argument is, for facilities we have, where we do hold events, it's inside the bridge. So we don't. The intent is not to hold events under the bridge, under the tent in the bridge. The tent would be just for the tastings.
So the bridge will also be used for, I mean, the bridge is already there, but what?
The bridge would be used for the things that are applied, are allowed under the existing
Sig-
permit,
special
I
use
guess.
permit. So the tasting, the winery wouldn't be using the bridge?
Not for tasting, so,
And the other events wouldn't be using the
The tent.
tent.
right.
So we're not figuring any of that into this equation, just this,
Apparently not, no.
just the tent
But
and
I'm a little concerned on changing the calculation of the capacity of a space based on the fact that you don't anticipate it to be that successful. Because there's just standards in my mind of, you know, what occupancy is for certain types of gatherings, whether it be mass gatherings like assemblies, church, that kind of thing, or events. And, I mean, we have to have some sort of a standard to deviate from, and for you to say, oh, you know, it could hold 200 people, but we don't anticipate more than 60. It doesn't work for me.
And I think what Mark is saying is that, and when we looked at it in the office, we were looking at seating similar to what you might have at a wedding, for example, where you might have a round table, where you might have 8 or 10 guests all sitting in an individual table where they would be spaced under a tent like this. And I think the use here being much different, where you might come in with a group and maybe there's 2 people, or maybe there's 4 people, or maybe there's 3 people. For a tasting, they're not all going to sit at a table with 6 or 7 other people or 4 other people. It's probably more like you would have tables that would seat 4 people or 3 people or maybe 5 people, and they would be spaced out. So it doesn't necessarily reflect the capacity depending on the different type of use that you might have, or if you had a wedding or a birthday party or some other type of function where you had tables set up to fit as many people as you could fit.
Would all the vineyard-related activity be happening within the tent or the warming house then?
During the warmer months, this would be used. Obviously, in the cold weather months, no, everything would happen within the warming house on the first floor, so it would be much less in terms of capacity, because this would not be occupied then. That
And-
probably wouldn't be there.
And again, related to the vineyard, is there anything happening on the grounds or outside? Are people like grabbing their glasses of wine and having a picnic?
Sure. Sure.
Where on the map?
Anyway, there's 2 tables throughout the ground.
Mostly
Over
where
by
the
the
trees are
pond,
shown is
where the flower
picnic
gardens
tables
are.
So that's taken into account that,
Sure, but we're following the way the code is, as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's code occupancy based on the buildings, right? Not necessarily.
It's based on the square footage of the buildings, correct?
So, yes, there's going to be that many people walking the grounds. But how do you want to calculate that?
We would have, I don't know what the correct way to calculate it would be.
Right.
There probably is a standard for it, but I'm not aware of it.
No, so.
Well, one of us should be.
so the total parking, it looks like there's what, like 30 or something? You know how many
Well-
parking spots there are? I didn't count them all.
Based on your regulations, we would be up to approximately
22, say, you say.
22 spaces.
But
With the
that-
building, would be up to 26.
That doesn't count any outside overflow people or workers, right? I mean, if you're gonna have,
Right, and actually,
I think the correct calculation for workers is
The
one
workers-
space for every 2 or something.
yeah, the
like
workers
that.
actually park up here right now, and there's enough space to fit all those right here. In fact, there's enough space to fit quite a few more than that if it were necessary.
that's just a one-sided parking lot?
That's
Is that
all.
what it is?
The
Or is
parking
it
lot's already
two-sided?
there, the gravel's there, that's the only area we need to use in order to fit that many spaces. I think
Right.
Ken was using both sides, and he actually had it extended out all the way down to here, but we don't need all that space to fit.
Because I think, I mean, I've been up there, I think there was on both sides. Like
There was.
Not,
There
like,
was.
I haven't
No,
been
you're
there
right.
in like 5,
There
10
is.
years or something.
And there is enough room, would it be necessary to fit a whole other row of parking over here? But once again, based on the calculations and what's
Mhm.
required in your regulations for that many people, we don't need to
So
utilize
nobody
all
would
that
need to
space.
park out on Mountain Road at all?
No.
There's
no.
plenty of like lawn or something?
There's
so
plenty of
people are
room here to
parking on
park
lawns?
up in this area.
So if you do have more than that 30 people, where would people park?
There is enough space to park up here.
We count, I mean, I don't know the rules, but I counted them for almost over 80.
Cars?
Because there's been a lot of cars up there for like the pancake breakfast and stuff like
Yes.
that. There's been a lot of cars up there, like
Yes.
more than what I see here. So I'm just
Yeah,
questioning.
so there is, There is more room to
Okay.
park additional cars up here if it were necessary, but we're only showing what would be required based on the occupancy that we're calculating.
Thank you. Do you have any?
If this would be a good time, I had received an email and instruction manual for the proposed type of tent. Karen had emailed it to me, so that would
So-
be marked Exhibit M.
Is it, okay.
You want me to submit this for the
Please,
record
yeah, please do.
and share it? So, if you guys want to pass it,
Okay.
pass it back, but just poll, you know.
Just the 30, but yeah, whole tent, yeah.
should
Do you
just
want to
speak
keep
it.
this with it?
Keep it with it, please.
Okay, is there a place on that plan where the proposed holding tank is to be used for the wastewater discharge from the wine operation? That's part of Steve's, said that the wastewater from the process of making the wine cannot be discharged into existing sewage system. Holding tank has been proposed and must be maintained.
So that would be behind, temporarily.
Is it on the map?
Is it on the, it would be with the current winery in the sugar shack.
Is it there already?
No.
No, it is not there, but there is
We don't
This
have water
location-
facilities there right now yet.
Excuse me?
We don't have water facilities at the sugar shack right now, so.
Okay.
Once we have the permit, we have to put a tank. As well.
So there is no discharge currently with the operation that you have?
Not yet.
No. So that would be, I guess to answer the question, that would be a location that would be up here. Then, of course, if the building is built, it would be down here. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not real familiar with that, with wineries. I'm somewhat familiar with breweries. Maybe I'm more of a beer guy, I don't know, but we've done some breweries. And if you had a sanitary sewer system that goes through a series of tanks and
Right.
chambers and it can't outlet into a sanitary system, we don't have that here. So my
No,
thought would be that this
Steve
would be
says that
a
it's going
holding
to
tank
need to be
that would be
picked up.
pumped, exactly. Would be taken care of by a pumper.
But that would be part of the application at that time, because this is really more so, like the commission noted before, this is more so for concept purposes to tell you what we're thinking about doing in the future, not what we're asking for tonight.
Mhm. But as far as the
As
tasting
soon as
room,
you start making wine, you're gonna have wastewater.
yeah,
Okay, you need to have a plan in place. That's basically what Steve's saying. Not for your eventual use in a building where the proposed future
I
tent
thought
is.
that was your question, Carl, there wasn't.
No, it's where is the wastewater going to be dealt with from the winemaking operation?
From the current one.
Current proposed. And apparently there's not a spot.
Well, we have temporary tanks right now, is what we have, but that's not, it's not showing. Put that in.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think we're gonna need not only to know where that's gonna be, but we need to know that you, from what Steve's saying, I think we need to know that you've got an arrangement. Yeah?
so right now you have temporary tanks that you use for wastewater? Yeah, you do.
Well,
That's what you have now.
That's what we're recommended, that's what we're told we need to do, is
Okay.
we need to store our wastewater and then
Because
have
your first answer was you don't have any water, so you don't need to worry about it.
So you don't, you're not at that point yet where you need it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Are you, is there anything growing in there? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
So you probably do a large temporary tank there, because you wouldn't wanna,
Right.
when you build, you do the big,
That's correct.
yeah, so, I mean, I don't know, he didn't have any specs on that, right?
No, he didn't. He just said that wastewater can't be discharged into the domestic sewage system. A holding tank has been proposed, but not on the map, and must be maintained by a Connecticut licensed waste hauler.
Mhm. So we don't have anything else from Steve, right, what he might have proposed?
Oh, and the DEP
Oh, just
is
the
in the
memo.
process
Okay.
of writing a new general
We've been in
permit
touch with-
requirement.
We've been in touch with DEP and we're talking about changing things.
Yeah, I didn't see that we're waiting on E
What the
DEP.
rules are, because you don't know what they're gonna do.
Right.
So it sounds like what we need to do is add the tank location up at the sugar house to show you where it's gonna be, the size of it, and then provide you with a contract with, whether it be Parker or somebody.
Yeah, whoever's gonna
that
deal
can
with it
haul,
for you.
Correct, so that you've got that in your file, so that you know it's being dealt with properly, which,
Right.
it's a simple thing, we can provide that for you.
I didn't think it was gonna be that hard to achieve. Anybody else?
I know, but any other questions up here? We can open it up to the public. Are you ready?
Sure.
Yeah, all right, so I'm gonna open the public hearing up to the public, so anyone that
Did
like.
you want a traffic study?
I'd like to.
Well, wait, you
cross
know what?
Do you want to do it
examine
a
Jay
section
now.
at a time, or would you rather?
You wanna
do
do
And then
the,
traffic.
hang on, wait, well, it's kind of our meeting here, so
Well,
I'm
it
gonna
is, but
see
we
if,
have rights, we have due process
you
rights.
do, but we're still taking information in from the applicant. So if you wanna move on and do the traffic study, and then open it to the public,
I think just get all of it out.
you wanna get your,
Okay.
okay, so we'll do that, we're gonna move on to the traffic study now. Yeah. Everybody has their copy, right? Last week, or a couple weeks ago.
Good evening. For the record, Colleen Byrne, certified road safety professional with Solely Engineering, offices located at 501 Main Street, Monroe, Connecticut. We prepared the traffic impact study for the project for the proposed winery land use. I'll start off by saying it's a relatively minor generator in terms of traffic. Typically, anything that's over 100 new trips during a peak hour, we would require a traffic study. I know it was requested that we prepare it, so we did, but our max peak generation is only 90 trips during the Saturday peak hour. And that's total trips entering and exiting. But I'll start a little bit backwards. Jay gave us a good oversight on the project, so I'm going to stick with the site driveway, which is located along Mountain Road. This is oriented differently, but north is up on this plan, so on the north side of Mountain Road. Existing driveway, no changes are proposed, no physical constructions proposed under this project or this application. So we looked at the Saturday and the PM peak hours of the adjacent street traffic on Mountain Road. We went out and counted the intersection, the site driveway, and the existing vehicles along Mountain Road during 2 peak hours, 4 to 6 p.m. on the weekday and 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday. The winery itself, under its operation, will not occur with the peak hour on Saturday of Mountain Road. So that occurred at 11:30 in the morning. However, the winery peak hour would be somewhere later in the afternoon, typically around 4 p.m. To provide a really conservative analysis, we took the trips for the winery and applied those to the peak hour of the traffic on Mountain Road, just to make sure that we were looking at a worst-case scenario. As I said before, we're 90 trips during Saturday, which is 42 trips entering and 48 exiting. And during the PM peak hour, it's only 18 trips, 9 entering, 9 exiting. So we use ITD trip generation for our estimates. I'll read the definition directly from the manual, just so we're on the same page here, but ITE Trip Generation Manual defines a winery as a property primarily used for the production of wine and typically includes tasting room facilities and may offer special events such as weddings or parties. And then for purposes of a winery, for this land use, the independent variable is 1,000 square feet of gross floor area, which refers to the square footage of the building that houses the tasting room. So for our trip generation estimates, we use the warming house, which is about 2,450 square feet total, all 3 floors, and that's where those numbers came from. Excuse me, the 90 new trips on Saturday and the 18 new trips during the PM peak hour. To take that information, we do some operational analysis at the stop-controlled site driveway just to see how it operates. The stop control is on the exiting driveway, and Mountain Road remains free-flowing, and based on that, the stop control approach is a level of service A, which is excellent. Less than 1 vehicle of queue coming out of the site driveway in both peak hours, and less than 10 seconds of delay. I think it was 8.8 seconds was the maximum delay, which occurred during Saturday. So we're not expecting any operational issues on Mountain Road. The trips that are being added to the network, there's plenty of capacity on the existing road to accommodate them. Level of service will remain level of service A, whether the winery use is added or not added. We looked at accident data along Mountain Road as well, starting at the property frontage and 0.1 miles in either direction. Over the past 5 years, there was actually no accidents reported in that vicinity, so there's no accident trends that would indicate any existing safety deficiencies. And so with that, I would make the statement that the additional traffic generated by the winery use at the site will not have an impact on the operating conditions of the area roadway network. And I can answer any questions.
Have any questions? Anybody here? No.
Kind of as I expected, we just
Right,
wanted it verified.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jill will mark the traffic study exhibit N.
Traffic study is Exhibit N. Mark and Karen, do you have anything else, or Sean, to add? Okay, so at this time, we're going to open the public hearing up to the public. Anybody that'd like to speak, you can state their name and address and give us their comments.
George Schober, 352 Billings Road. I represent Ken Pryor. I have a number of questions for Jay Ursary first. I calculate that the number of parking spaces that are needed are 153. And that's based on information that the Murdochs provided, as well as information that we used for Hillsdale and information that was on the set of plans that were turned in on November 18th. So the first calculation is that the covered bridge, the Murdochs in their application, they call it, I guess, well, I don't know if it's an executive summary, it's a special use permit application, and they say that on page 9 that the covered bridge can be configured to accommodate group events with seating of up to 120 guests. And what's important here is that we not just look at what may happen with winery guests, but we look at what could be happening on the entire site at any given time. So how many people may be on that site? That's how many parking spaces we need. We don't say, we're adding on this store in a shopping center and we only have to worry about 10 spaces. We have to look at the whole shopping center. So here we have existing uses. We have 120 people that can be accommodated on the covered bridge. At 3 people per vehicle, that's 40 vehicles, that's 40 parking spaces. The warming house can hold 100 people. And again, this is right from the Murdochs. This is on page 8 of their special use permit application. The building is permitted for occupancy of up to 100 persons. So that's 33 more spaces, so we're up to 77 spaces. The tent at 1,800 square feet is not going to hold 30 people. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That tent can easily hold 15 or one person per 15 square feet, which my math is 120 people in that 1,800 square foot tent. And that's without stuffing people in. That's not an issue at all. So you divide that by your 3, that's 3 people per vehicle. That's another 40. So now we're up to 113. And let's not forget that this primary use of this property is an outdoor recreation area. So presumably, people are going to this property to outdoor recreate, whatever that may be. I don't know what they're doing up there, but we need to allow some spaces for that because that's what the Murdochs tell us is happening here. So you're also going to have people walking around with their bottle of wine and going to picnic here and there. I think if you took another 40 spaces, which would be equivalent to either the, which would be equivalent to the tent or the covered bridge, that would be sufficient. That's just an estimate. 153 spaces. We need to see 153 spaces or some amount there, around there on this plan. I don't know whether this plan can hold 153 vehicles, but we don't want people on Mountain Road. We don't want people parked willy-nilly. My client lives directly across the street. He doesn't want people parked along the entranceway. So this plan, like any other plan, needs to show where these people are going to park. The septic plan, do you know, Jay, was that an as-built or was that just a proposal?
I believe Steve Jacobs has an as-built on it. He was involved, obviously, when it was constructed. And I know he has reviewed the proposed use that the Murdoch's application talks about. And he has issued some kind of a memo to the commission indicating that he feels that it's sufficient. I really have never talked to Steve myself about it. I do have the plans that talk about its design criteria. I don't have those with me, unfortunately.
Did you get a copy?
In this particular case, it's a little different than residential. It's obviously based on the number of people in occupancy at a certain amount of gallons per day, per person.
Yeah, I did review Steve's file, but I did review the file at the zoning office, and there were plans that were in there when the facility was being designed for the septic, but there was no as-built. And so usually in the zoning files, I would find the as-built. And I noticed, I think, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of your map references was the Mike Mocco map, but that wasn't the as-built, that was the proposed.
Yeah, that was what we were given by the staff, and whether there's an as-built or not, I'm not positive of that. Typically, with a leach field or a septic system, the as-built consists of really nothing more than a tied location so that they could go out and find it. It doesn't necessarily show the exact size, the types of units put in, but it typically, in the permit that was taken out, all right, so in other words, a licensed installer came in and took out a permit to build this, it would have said what they were installing in terms of square footage, which I would assume Steve would have checked to see that it related to the design that was actually submitted and approved to make sure that the two were dovetailed with each other. But in terms of an actual as-built of a leach field, even in a commercial property, it's generally a little unusual. We would be out locating stuff. It would simply be ties to distribution boxes, tanks, and that information I think Steve does have, but we would have to investigate the file a little further to see exactly what was built. I would guess the information's there, but I don't have it.
Yeah, I think we need to find that out. I think we need to know what is happening with the septic. I did a quick calculation measurement with my scale on the plan, and I show the septic tanks that are up by the portable, or whatever you want to call them, bathrooms, and I show those running about 1,200 feet, which is close to a quarter of a mile, being fed to the leaching fields. And I think, and it goes under the covered bridge. I don't know if it's attached to the underside of the covered bridge. I mean, we don't know anything. At least I don't know anything. I'm presuming the commission knows very little about this as well. But I think it's important that the septic design be fully investigated to make sure that everything is proper. Now, the Murdoch's application states that the Vittles station, which is apparently some sort of building out by the covered bridge, is going to also be used as a sort of I don't know if it's a sales area. It's another place that they can sell wine or distribute wine from. I didn't see that on the site plan. Am I missing that?
No, it actually, Madam Chairman, is it okay if I just kind of go back and forth with George here? Typically, it would kind of go.
I know, it
in
don't.
a triangular form, but
It would, but counsel has the right to cross-examine without going through the chair, and I hope Attorney Landolina has clarified that for the commission. So it makes it a heck of a lot easier if we just do go back and forth.
here, let me put this back up, George, so I can show you where that is.
Is it on the site plan, Jay, or just on the existing buildings?
Hold on 1 second.
And just for the record and for the commission's reference, this is on page 12 of the Murdoch's special use permit application, where it states another location would be to utilize the Vittles station near the bridge. The Vittles station has a refrigerator and sink with hot and cold water. Wine may be stored in the Vittles station, as this building can be locked when not in use. And these 2 additional points of sale would alleviate traffic congestion. And the other point of sale they're talking about is the tent.
Yeah, so it's located right here. There's a brick patio area, and then the annotation is here, Vittles Station. It's actually
Where's
written a
that,
couple times. So it's just off to the west of the bridge itself, the covered bridge. And it's shown right here, along with a patio that's in front of it. It's just off the plan sheet on the larger blow-up. It's actually right here.
So I think we need to see that and what may be happening around there. There's a notation for a concrete pad with chiller at the Sugar Shack. Could somebody explain, can you explain to me what that is, Jay? Or maybe your client will have to do it, I don't know. I think you'll see it on the larger plan.
It's on the smaller one too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually, it's right off to the back of the building, concrete pad with chiller.
What is that?
Some kind of a mechanical.
The chiller for the wine.
I'm sorry?
It's a large
Mechanical.
to keep the wine cool.
A refrigerator, keep the wine cold. Thank you. Now, is the parking lot dirt or gravel? Because there are plans that predate the December 3rd plans that state dirt parking lot.
Yeah, if you were to go up and look at it, it hasn't been used in a while, so it's got grass growing up through it, which kind of makes it look like a lawn. I suppose you could look at it and say it's a great example of a pervious gravel parking area, but it is gravel. Dan had a gravel lot there. It needs a little bit of probably gravel spread over the top and to get it cleaned up a little bit, but it is a gravel lot that had been there since probably Dan started the operation some years back, but it's got a little grass growing up through it due to lack of use.
Okay. And then how about, there's a road that's shown that up until this last set of plans, it was labeled dirt road, and now it's labeled gravel road. And that road is just I guess it would be west of the parking lot. It says gravel road, but other plans have stated that that was a dirt road.
No, that's gravel as well, but again,
Okay.
same condition, grown up with grass and so forth growing through it, but it was gravel,
All right.
as well as the parking area.
Now, while you're up there, before you sit,
Yep.
on the colored aerial map,
Okay, hold on, let me go back. Right,
up in what I would say would be the northeast corner.
over here?
Yes. Is there a building up there, right where your pen is? Or is you see that dark brown?
Right
Yeah,
here.
right.
Yeah, there may be something, I don't, honestly, George, I don't know what it is, I haven't been out that far. Our guys may have been out there, but I didn't ask them, I'm not sure. It does appear that there's something there, and there is a road, an old farm road that comes out and comes up through here and winds its way back into that corner.
That's part of the map that's future development.
No, this is just an overall. It's existing
No,
now. This map.
But that isn't, that corner of the map isn't
Well,
part of the particular application.
I don't know.
No, we're not showing any.
We don't know either.
We're not proposing
We don't know
anything
if
to be
there's
done
anything
there right
on
now.
it.
No, there's no proposed change or use in this location.
Okay. Now, how many bathrooms are there on the property, and where are they located?
That is a good question, and I did ask that one. So let me go back here. And I was really asking in terms of handicap accessibility.
Yeah, that's my next area.
Karen
of
was
question.
able to answer those. So there's restrooms here, I believe, women's and men's, and there is handicap accessibility here. There are also bathrooms located within the warming house, I believe, women's and men's.
Can you just clarify when you say here what you're referring to so that it's
So let's go back, and the first place that I was referring to is down on the gravel area where the proposed seasonal tent would go.
Thank you.
And there is sanitary facilities there, able to accommodate men, women, and handicap accessibility. When we go out to the warming house, there is sanitary facilities, men's and women's.
There's
and
one unisex bathroom.
one unisex handicap accessible bathroom in the warming house.
So there's one bathroom in the warming house, and how many bathrooms total are there in the unit over by the bridge? How many? I don't know if you call them stalls. I don't know what the
There's three there,
3 total.
yes.
So like a men's, a woman's, and a unisex. So there's 4 bathrooms on the entire property. Okay. To accommodate either potentially 200 or 300 people at any given time, depending on what events are going on. Is there a health code regulation, Jay, regarding number of bathrooms per people?
I'm not sure that it's a health code regulation or a building department regulation. I think it may be a building department regulation, to be honest.
Okay.
So that would be something that would come through building. I'm not sure that Steve would have the answer to that based on occupancy,
Okay.
but I think it's more of a building department issue in terms of occupancy and how many bathrooms are required.
Okay. So I think we need to know that. I think when you have this
Did
many
you
people.
read Steve Jacobs? Because Steve Jacobs says in here, number 4, on public assembly, it says, adding a tent, adding events in the tent, that you would bring in portable restrooms for that if you needed. It says it there. But it says the system
convenience.
at peak is at 285 people per day. And it,
Well, that's the sewage disposal system. What I'm wondering about is how many bathrooms you actually need per, how many people how many bathrooms you need.
per person?
Yeah, I don't know, per person is the right words. That's what I was trying to, because it's not, you don't need like 2 per person.
Right, but
you need, how many
For
bathrooms
every
you
10
need?
people,
There
you
you go,
need
thank you.
XYZ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
so,
believe there's anything
I don't
in our
think, I've never
regulations concerning that at
even
all.
heard that.
There may be building code, as Jay said, but I do not believe there is anything in our zoning regs.
well, I think your zoning regs require that there be proper,
We basically require that they get signed off by the
By
sanitary
sanitary.
officer.
okay, and I'll take a look at what else I thought when somebody else is speaking on what I'm thinking of, which I can't think of right now. I got to tell you, I got the booster shot Friday, and my head is just hasn't been the same since Friday, and I'm sure it shows, and I apologize for that because I'm usually not this scattered. I'm giving the client a disservice, but he's aware of my difficulty here tonight. But let me continue. That's not your concern. The tent is going to house a bar, is that correct?
Not a bar, tasting station.
A tasting station, I guess you would call it.
What is a tasting station?
Just a serving table.
A serving table. So should that be shown on the plan as to where in the tent it's going to be, and any other things should they be shown? I mean, normally when you have buildings, you're looking at what's inside that building. Am I correct?
Well,
Or
we are for floor plans, but I mean, a tent could move. You could have it over there. You put it over. I'm just.
Well, I don't know. It
When a
seemed to me-
temporary tent has a floor plan, I don't know.
it seems to me like there might be in this case. If you have a tent that's just set up and you put in a bunch of tables, I mean, I think that's one thing. But if you're going to have what is in essence a bar or a was it tasting table? Tasting table, whatever it is.
Tasting
I think
station, I think.
station.
would be
That's what it
more
was.
accurate.
I think you locate that on the plan.
I tend to agree with Jill on that matter, though,
Yeah.
George. I think that given that it is a temporary structure, they would have the flexibility to put it where they feel it's necessary. It may not be necessary to have it in the same spot all the time.
It's like when you go
Or at
to
all.
a
Or
banquet.
or at all.
And-
Or maybe it needs to be split and they need to have two stations. Who knows?
I mean, if you look at like a ballroom, they might have an in-place bar, but they'll have little things set up around for a big event, right? So, I mean, I just envision a table that's, maybe it's over here this time, maybe it's over here this time. It's a tent.
Okay.
It's like a patio.
I guess we thought that we would build portable furniture for this bar because we have to be able to lock it up. You know, you obviously can't lock a tent, so we thought we'd utilize the victual station since it's lockable because we have to be able to lock up the liquor at the end of every day
Yeah.
and account for how much has been sold. So, you know, we thought our furniture for serving would be something more portable, and then we would load all of the unsold wine back to one of the buildings that's locked.
Okay.
Jay, is there a sight line profile plan anywhere?
I do not have one. I don't know whether one is available or whether one had been done prior when Dan came in for his permitting, but I did not look at that.
I didn't see one in the file, and the concern is, and we're going to have testimony from my client later regarding issues with the sight line. He's actually gone out and measured the sight line, and we think that there is a serious safety problem here, but we'll have some testimony on that later. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing a sheet of the plan. I think that's all I have for Jay. I do have a few questions for Ms. Byrne, the certified road safety professional, and I guess, so my name is George Schober. I'm an attorney here in town, and my first question is, what is a certified road safety professional?
It is a certification through the Transportation Research Board, which is similar to a PTOE or a PTP, but there's two levels.
I'm sorry, what was that?
It's the same board that issues a PTOE, which is a professional traffic operations engineer, or a PTP, which is a professional transportation planner. They also offer a certification, which is Road Safety Professional, Level 1 and 2. I happen to be Level 2 with a specialty in infrastructure.
Okay, so I checked the website, the Connecticut website for professional engineers. I did not find you there. I presume you are not a professional engineer?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm a certified road safety professional.
Understood. Now, you made an assumption based on square footage of the tasting room as to how many people could fit in that tasting room. Is that correct?
No, I didn't do any occupancy calculations.
Oh, okay. What calculation did you do to determine how many cars might be coming?
Oh, okay. Yep. We use the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, which establishes average generation rates for vehicle trips based on, in this case, a variable of per 1,000 square feet of floor area, gross floor area, for the tasting room facility.
Okay. And what was the amount of square footage that you calculated for the tasting room?
It was based on the property records for the building, which I believe is 2,462 square feet.
So this doesn't take into account the number of people that may be in the building. It's based solely on square footage.
Correct.
Okay. So when you add 1,800 square feet of a tent, which we heard tonight was going to be used as additional area for people, is that in your calculations?
The additional square footage associated with the tent is not included in the calculations, being that it's temporary and seasonal. And the ITE trip generation, which is where I read the definition, it's based on the square footage of the tasting room housed within the winery. So that's what we base our calculations on.
Okay, so in other words, you didn't have all the facts you needed to give us an accurate count because you didn't know about the tent that's being used as a tasting room with 1,800 square feet.
That's not what she said, George.
That's it.
Don't try to twist her words. Go ahead, you can ask her a question that she can answer, but that's not what she said at all.
Don't tell me what I can or can't do, Sean.
George, I can object if you're outside
You
the
can
scope.
object, but you're not going to tell me what I can or
So I
can't
object to
do.
your question.
I'm
Please
gonna
ask
put
an
it,
appropriate question.
we're gonna stop this right here and I'll have you address us if we're not gonna be civil. I'm not gonna let this
I've listened to him
I know,
make
but
comments over the months that this has been going on that are unprofessional, and I'm not going to stand here and listen to it again.
George, just for you to ask a question of a witness who just didn't testify about that, that's all I'm saying. So ask her a question based on what she actually did say.
Now, did you take into account the tasting room of 1,800 square feet into your calculations?
The tasting room is a warming house, which is 2,462 square feet.
And the Murdochs are proposing the tent as a tasting room as well for an additional 1,800 square feet. Did you take? I'm sorry.
Additional square footage added to the calculations for the temporary.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
There was no additional square footage added to the calculations based on the temporary seasonal effect.
Okay. So your report does not account for all the square footage being used for tasting rooms in that facility. Is that correct?
My report was based on 2,462 square feet of tasting room.
Okay. So it doesn't. Now, did you calculate speed on Mountain Road?
No,
Do you have does your firm have the capability of doing that?
we did.
Okay. Why did you not calculate speed on Mountain Road?
Typically, we would only cut, well, there's no proposed modifications to the site driveway, so there was no accident history or anything that made me think that I needed to go out and look at speed data because there's no proposed driveway changes, which doesn't require any site distance calculations, and there was no accident history, which indicated there was a speeding issue in the area.
Did you examine the sight lines while you were out there?
I did review them, yes.
And did you calculate what the sight lines were?
I calculated the required site distance based on the posted speed limit of Mountain Road.
And what is the required sight distance based on the posted speed limit of Mountain Road?
That would be 30 miles per hour. ISD is 331 feet.
I'm sorry, ISD?
Intersection site distance.
331?
That's correct.
Now,
And then we also have stopping site distance. which
Yes.
is a different.
Okay, and what, I'm sorry, you said 330?
Yes,
Yep.
331.
331. And what is the stopping sight distance?
For 30 miles an hour, it would be 200 feet.
200 feet. Now, does that take into account the grade of Mountain Road?
That assumes a grade of up to 3% in either direction.
Okay. And if I were to tell you that the grade were approximately 9% coming down the hill,
Measured over which distance?
over a fairly large distance. We're going to put some maps into evidence. Are you aware that Mountain Road was recently reconstructed by the town of Summers?
I am.
And are you aware that there was a full set of surveys from the base of Turnpike all the way to the town of Stafford? There is a full set of surveys with grades of Mountain Road.
I have not seen those ones.
Okay. So we have some of those, and we'll be putting those into evidence. So presuming that the grade is approximately 9% coming down the hill, do you know what the stopping sight distance would be?
I don't have those calculations.
Okay.
That would make the assumption that the 9% occurs within the 200 feet within the site driveway.
Yes. Okay. Now, you said the ISD, the intersection sight distance, would be 331 feet at 30 miles an hour.
Correct.
Do you know what it would be at 35 miles an hour?
I don't have those calculations on me.
Would it be greater than 331 feet?
Yes.
Yes. Are you familiar with the term 85th percentile?
Yes.
What is that?
For this road?
No, what is the 85th percentile? What's the term mean? I'd like you to explain it to the commission, because you'll do a better job than I will.
So when you look at speed data, you have your low, you have your high, you have your average. We typically look at the 85th percentile, which is halfway between 50%, or 15% more than halfway, than average, and then 15% less than the maximum speed. So we do a calculation, get the 85th percentile speed, and that's typically what would be used if we were evaluating, say, a new site driveway. We would want to look at the 85th percentile speed and calculating the intersection site distance.
Okay, but that wasn't done here.
No, there's no proposed changes to this driveway.
So if the driveway is unsafe, and I'm not saying it is right now, just for the sake of this discussion that we're having, if the driveway is unsafe, then you can just keep piling more people in, and you wouldn't look at that because it's not a new driveway.
No, I looked at the accident history, and there's no accident history that would lead me to believe there's a safety deficiency which would need to be evaluated.
So if there's no accidents, you could still have an unsafe driveway, but if there's no accidents for whatever reason, maybe it's a fairly lightly traveled road, it's pretty rural up there, but for whatever the reason is, if there is no accident history, then there's no need, in your opinion, to look at the 85th percentile and do a calculation of the ISD. Is that a fair statement or no?
It's not the only determining factor, but it's a primary factor that we would consider as safety history.
Okay. Do you know how wide Mountain Road is?
10-foot lanes with variable width shoulders.
I'm sorry?
Typically 10-foot lanes with variable width shoulders.
Okay, do you know if in places it's less than 10-foot lanes?
To my knowledge, along the property frontage, it's 10 feet. It may be outside the property frontage. The primary focus of the traffic study is along the property frontage.
Okay. Now, you said that the ISD is at 30 miles an hour is 331 feet. In your experience, how long have you been doing this type of work?
Since 2006.
It's about 15 years?
A little bit more, yes.
So in your experience, is the 85th percentile speed close to the posted speed limit on rural roads such as this?
It depends on the roadway conditions. So a road like this that has what we would consider slightly narrow lanes at 10 feet, typically we would call that a traffic calming measure. So we tend to slow the speeds along with the grades and roadway curvature. Typically people drive over the posted speed limit, and which is why when we're looking at a new driveway or somewhere that has a safety history deficiency with a safety history, you would look at the 85th percentile so that any design you have is conservative, assuming that someone's going to speak.
Okay. Now, I may have asked you this, and if I did, I apologize. Do you know what the ISD would be at 35 miles an hour?
I don't know the calculation.
Did I ask you that?
You did.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. All right. That's all I have right now anyway. You're not going anywhere though, right? Okay. Thank you. So that's all I have of the two experts, but we do have a lot more to talk about, believe it or not. Shall I continue, or did you want to open up?
Let's see if anybody
Sure.
else, I mean, everybody here has a role. They're either,
Pretty much.
yeah, so I don't
The
know.
first selectman's here. Maybe he's got some questions. I don't know.
Very entertaining, George.
Well, that wasn't the goal, Tim.
You find it entertaining?
I think some of the septic questions might be outside of the scope.
I do as well.
That was my concern.
Yeah.
Madam Commissioner, I'm going to ask that they can leave because Colleen has arrived. It's a little bit longer than mine, and there's no reason for them to stay. If Attorney Schober has more questions, he should ask those questions now. But we're not going to hold witnesses here
Yeah, I
at this
mean,
point.
All right, give us a minute, and let me see if my client has anything that is Jay leaving as well?
Yeah.
Yes, I don't see any reason to keep them, guys.
Well, it's just your application you're trying to get approved, but that's your choice.
Thanks, George.
Oh, yeah. We need to put in. Thank you. Mike, did you have anything else? We need to put in. Mr. Pryor has done some measurements of the sight lines, and I think that we need to get that in while the experts are here. So, Ken, why don't you tell the commission what you did?
Okay. Ken Pryor, 364 Mountain Road. I used a measuring wheel to check the sight lines myself and found going downhill it was about 350 feet. Going uphill, about 270 feet. Now going uphill, there's a curve. So this time of year, all the vegetation's gone. You go a little bit further. But summertime, when that vegetation is there, you cannot see around that corner. So it's probably a little bit shorter than 270 feet. Also, I want to talk about the crash data.
So before you go to the crash data, how exactly did you determine where you could see from? In other words, you're saying 270 feet and whatever the other number, 350 feet. How did you determine that in the first place, where you started measuring from?
Well, basically that I rolled it from the center line of the road and where I could see the driveway and 10 feet back from the driveway.
Okay. All right. And you came up with the 270 uphill and the 350 downhill?
Yes.
Okay. So go ahead. Go.
Now, the crash data in the traffic survey is inaccurate. I don't know what DOT is using, if somebody has to die or not, but I witnessed the aftermath of 2 accidents within the time frame cited. The most recent was 280 feet away from the entrance of the winery. This occurred 2 summers ago when a pickup truck lost control going uphill on Mountain Road. It veered into my neighbor's driveway at 372 Mountain Road, hitting his stone wall, a small bush, and then coming to rest in his front yard. The earlier accident, there were 2 cars involved right at the entrance of Worthington Pond. A car driven by a young male either was passing or trying to avoid a slower vehicle possibly turning into Worthington Pond. But whatever the case, he ended up hitting a tree. He spun across the ditch and across the driveway of Worthington Pond, totaling the car. I'm disappointed traffic study has no speed data contained within the report. How fast traffic is actually going, I would think that would be important information. The sight lines in this corner is too short. Traffic travels over the posted limit and often misses the entrance to the Worthington Pond, resulting in many cars using my driveway as a turnaround point for the facility. I didn't see anything in the plans about added signs, additional signs showing that the entrance was coming up. How is that going to be remedied? It was awful when earlier had all these events there, and there was a constant stream of cars turning around my driveway. Is there any plans to add a sign in the vineyard or something?
We're happy to put up signs on the property, you know, of course, following the zoning signage requirements.
Do we have to do?
Is there any requirements for that, like a note,
There's no sign
like
requirements, but
well,
you
even
could
like,
make it a condition.
well, as a vineyard,
It
the
would be a
state of
courtesy.
Connecticut has the
Wine
wayfinder,
trail.
the find the trail type signs that can go up, right?
Right.
And it says it's like a mile up or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to look into
Next
that,
left.
but whatever is, permissible by the building department too. Yeah, we could look into that, right?
Also, the installed lights are not shielded. They light up the road and adjacent properties, casting shadows that can clearly be seen in pictures that we have here. The two closest to the road are the worst offenders. The pictures were taken December 4th from my master bedroom and my living room. They range from 8:40 at night to 11:01 at night.
Was that Saturday night, Ken?
Yes.
So Saturday, December 4th.
So exhibit O.
Oh, for the
Photos.
five pictures, is there, or four?
How many exactly? Yeah.
1, 2, 3,
5,
4.
4.
I can address that. Is that what
Like, when they're done, when they're done.
Sheet flow and drainage from the vineyard down into Gillette Brook is
George,
one
I
problem.
don't mean to interrupt, you can go on if you want, but I thought you wanted to have him talk about traffic stuff, so
Yeah,
the
yeah,
engineers out
we'll
here.
hold on anything not traffic.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
good. So, Jay, is there a lighting plan?
We do not have a lighting plan, however, there are existing lights up there, which I can show you on here.
Marked on the plan.
And if you take a look at these pictures, I think you'll see the need for a lighting plan. Those pictures are taken from my client's property right across the street. It looks like Foxborough Stadium.
Is that at the entrance, those lights?
Yeah.
So then you want to keep the lights because you want people to see the entrance, right?
Well, not at 11 o'clock at night.
No, but
Not like
the
that.
lights. The lights are supposed to be shielded. They're not
Shielded.
supposed to cast light up. They're only supposed to cast light down.
This was probably before that zoning.
I don't know what we can do about existing conditions
That's
that
what I'm
aren't proposed with this application, though.
Oh, you could, to give them the special use permit, they are required to put a lighting, to provide a lighting plan per your regulations, and we're gonna go over that.
Well, if they're adding lights,
Even
because if
they're- they've
it's
gotta
an
bring it into-
existing,
They've gotta bring this into
So we're gonna-
compliance now. You can't make
I
this
could
any
name
worse.
so many places in town that I would love to see lights shielded, but
But they're not here asking for something that you don't have to give, by the way.
We understand, George.
Yeah.
Really.
we know our job.
So I guess, George, to answer your question, the existing lights are shown. There are lights down at the entryway by the gate. Coming up the main driveway, there are lights. There are a series of lights along the parking lot up here to the east in the gravel parking area. There are also lights in various locations along the driveways within the site itself. Those are all shown on here. But in terms of the actual type of light, technical information, I don't know. They're all existing. I don't know what they are.
Okay, but I mean, so here's the deal. You're asking for a new use of property, which means that they have to comply
Correct.
with these regulations. So I think we need a lighting plan per the regulations. So, and by the way, we've heard how they want to be good neighbors. I don't know why they wouldn't take care of this voluntarily, but in any event, the lights are an issue.
All of the lights or the lights by the road?
The lights that Mr. Pryor
lights
can
by
see
the
from
road.
his house that don't meet the
They should not
regulations.
All
Eliminate
lights,
his
though,
house.
it's not just
Agreed.
about that.
What's that?
It's
They
about
shouldn't
nature
illuminate
and
your
all
house.
that,
No,
too.
I mean,
So
I
it's
could,
not
you could
just
see
about.
shadows.
I
Yeah,
I think that George brought up some valid points about the traffic study, in that we're not sure what the main speed is on the street. I understand the explanation of that it's not a new driveway, but it's certainly a different use than what is currently being used for. I don't know that the time of day that the uses proposed for this use are going to cause anything to go on after dark for the most part because of the hours of operation.
Right.
This time of year maybe a little bit.
Is that a question? Or?
No, I'm just saying. I
And
didn't mean to make it sound like a question.
Yeah.
And to add to that, it seems like the approval of this application would actually increase the use overall, including around the outdoor recreation usage of the property. And so therefore, I'd have a problem of completely separating the traffic study from whatever additional use may happen on this property based on this application. Seems like, the
Well,
other major uses should be worked in as well.
I think the experts follow the code, is what they do. I defer to them.
Are you asking to relook at the study with larger number of people coming to the property?
I think that the capacity of the property would have an effect on the traffic flow on and off the property, yes.
Just want
I
to,
understand that she based her traffic report on the parameters given, and I think maybe some parameters were left off. Because I tend to agree that if you already have a use of, I don't throw out a number, 50 people on average a day, and you bring in a use that's going to cause another 131 people a day, you need to factor that in to get an accurate reading of what the total effect would be. Beyond that, I have a lot of questions.
yeah, what we're going to have to do is really state our names when we're talking, because I know the camera can pick up us up here. I don't think it picks up everybody over there, and we've got different people talking, and we don't know who's who. Just this has to be.
In the event that
Of a
we have to
transcript,
recreate this,
if we have
it's
to-
helpful if everyone states their name
We know who they are.
when they speak.
So, two things. One, well, I have a lot more than two, but we'll start with two.
State your names.
Oh, thank you. George Schober. First, the commission, as you know, has the ability to get its own expert to either review or perform a traffic study or anything else the commission may want. So you could either have an independent expert do this, or you could request that the applicant do it, or both. So I just point that out there, and I know you're aware of it, but I just wanted to mention it. And the second thing is we do have a couple of what we think are deficiencies with the plan that we wanted to address with Jay before he left. But with me tonight, and I'm going to let him do this because he was prepared to do it, but in a sort of different format. My son Mike is here, and Mike is a second-year University of Connecticut law student in the middle of finals. My client has consented to Mike working on this and actually handling some of this, and it's been a great experience for him because this is a pretty good-sized project, and there was a lot to digest. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike on the items that are left that we had to deal with, that we wanted to talk to Jay about.
Sure. So Mike Schober, 98 Rocky Dundy Road, for the record. And so Section 7 has a list of requirements of basically other plans you need to include within your site plan. I think you need to show it on the site plan map. It have all this mapped out, or you need some other plans in addition. And these include parking and loading, exterior lighting, landscaping, stormwater management, soil erosion and sediment control. There's some standards about driveways, groundwater protection, pedestrian improvements, refuse management. So all of Section 7 is largely missing from this application. And per Section 9.8C, per Section 9.4C, and per Section 9.3C, anything missing is means it must be denied, the application. So for site plans, for special use permits, and just an application to the board in general. So all this needs to be here. So just going one by one, I mean, the lighting we already touched on, there's standards given within it. They need to meet the standards. If they don't meet the standards, we're primarily concerned about those ones at the entryway, of course, but this goes really for the property. It needs to meet those standards within Section 7.3 for exterior lighting. For the parking and loading, Section 7.2, there are dimensions given for parking spaces. There are certain standards for basically how you're going to have trucks come in and such. You need to show this on the plan. You need to show where trucks are unloading. You have to be shielding this stuff as well, which I believe is in the landscaping section. So we'll jump to 7.4. And I know I'm just touching on this briefly, but you can go through and I can read it to you, but you all have the regulations, so I don't feel the need to read verbatim what all these say. But so 7.4, landscaping, you need there's buffering and screening requirements that you need to have to shield really everything from lights or from loading. You need there are actually specific requirements for landscaping for a parking lot, for how many parking spaces you need to have either tree or shrubs. And I think it's in 7.4C is the landscaping requirements for that. For the stormwater management, that's Section 7.5, which I think we've already touched on. 7.6, soil erosion and sediment control. So it's required if you're going to have any development. Now, I'll note that a tent is considered a structure. It's the same consideration as a building under your regulations. So it's a development. It requires a soil erosion and sediment control plan. For the driveway, there are, I think that was just the safety standards. But for groundwater protection, any new sites and any large sites, pedestrian improvements, if you're going to have any sidewalks, any walkways, and not saying you're going to add any of those, but if you are, they've got to be on the plan, and same with refuse management. So that's a brief, just kind of run through of all those sections and generally what they require. And again, if anything is missing, it can't be approved.
Jay Ursary, J.R. Russo for the record. And just listening to the requirements here, those are some questions that actually did come up when we first got involved here. And oh boy, the whole project just crashed. And we had a meeting with the town staff to discuss some of these things. And what do we need to show? How much detail do we need to show? What do we need to address? And we sat with Jen and took out those sections and went through them all. And there are a number of things in here that were just mentioned that we determined that probably didn't need to be shown in this particular instance, since we're not proposing any new construction. For example, stormwater management. Well, we're not building anything here. We're not putting in new roads. We're not putting in drainage. We're not building buildings. We're putting up a temporary tent on an existing gravel pad that, in an engineering standpoint and a drainage standpoint, is already impervious coverage. So we're not changing anything. So there's really no need for a stormwater management plan per se, or a drainage study, or that type of thing. Soil and erosion control measures, soil and erosion control plan, same thing. We're not building anything here. Everything that we're using is already here. It's already existing condition. landscape buffers, screening requirements, parking, landscaping. I would say for the most part, again, we're not building anything. All the parking is existing. It is heavily landscaped, and we're showing a lot of landscaped areas. And I think any of you who've been up there would agree that it's heavily landscaped. Parking and loading areas in the future development plan, potential future development, we're showing some proposed parking and loading areas. And as I stated earlier, we certainly would have to come back to you with a more detailed plan to show you how that's going to work. That would entail at that point some stormwater management, some soil and erosion controls, probably some refuse management within that location, lighting, but again, that's future. We would be back to you with that. So essentially, we're trying to occupy and propose a use at an existing facility where we're not necessarily building anything new. And it was determined that many of the things that are incorporated into your regulations that are necessary in most applications don't really apply here because there's no new construction happening here. In this application that you have before you, all we're really talking about adding is a temporary seasonal tent on an existing gravel pad. There's nothing else that we're really doing. Everything else is already there. In terms of the lighting, maybe that's something that we can look at for you and provide some information. And if they're not full cutoffs down at the beginning by the driveway entrance, we could certainly modify those and make them full cutoffs so as to reduce any lighting or any glare that Mr. Pryor sees across the street of his house. And I would agree that's something that we can do and should be looked at. But I think for the most part, without going into a lot of detail, a lot of the things that we just discussed don't really necessarily apply in this particular application.
Regulations allow the zoning officer to determine what's required. Right?
That's correct.
And we did receive a letter confirming that from the zoning officer that those were not requirements of application.
Go ahead, you want to take it, Mike?
Well, first of all, if I may, so Mike Show for the record, quite frankly, this just based, maybe it's not new construction in the way that you might consider it, but under the regulations, it is considered to be that because it's a structure. The tent is a structure, and if you go to the definition of what a development is any man-made change to improved or unimproved real estate, including but not limited to buildings or other structures. Also, another structure under this would be, I think they call it water tanks or storage tanks and such, which I think would apply as well to the tasting room, whatever the tank you need outside of that. That's another. So just under the plain language of the regulations, they are required.
I disagree.
Okay. And also, it should be pointed out that your site plan requirements are you are required to do these things, and these aren't waivable. Certain of these that were waived are not waivable, and there's a court case that basically says, these are your regulations, and you have to follow them. If you don't like your regulations, you can change them, but you can't say to this applicant, you don't have to follow them. And it's right in there that these have to be followed. So it's fine if the applicant doesn't want to present these. That means you need to deny it, and if you don't, then obviously it's very helpful in any appeal. So, we're just pointing out the deficiencies with the application, and the commission may do with it, and the applicant may do with it as they wish.
Might I, Jennifer Roy, for the record, just wanted to confirm with the Murdochs and Jay Usuri's comment. I have an email dated October 21st summarizing, and I believe the commission was provided this summary, summarizing what we felt was not necessary, and this list and meeting was done under section 9.4, special use permit application, section B, number 2. Each application for special use permit shall be accompanied by appropriate plans and drawings unless expressly waived by the commission or in writing by the zoning enforcement officer. If a site plan is required, such site plan shall include the information required for a site plan application and shall be considered as integral to the special use permit.
And that's what you can't waive, is that sentence there. If a site plan is required, such site plan shall include the information required for a site plan application. And that's in 9.3, and that's what we're talking about, are these items in 9.3. You can waive other things, but not this. And you can, everybody can interpret it their own way.
Without the town attorney here, I'm stating the section and premise that I met with the applicant and the surveyor and the list we went through. And I'll mark that Exhibit P.
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch all
Exhibit
of
P.
that. No,
my email, my list, our document.
And what did you say about the town attorney? I didn't catch that.
I'm not going to go back and forth about if it's
my
interpretation of the regulations.
I thought you
He's
mentioned the
here.
town. I thought you mentioned the town
Right,
attorney.
he's not here to respond.
Oh, got
so
it.
I'm
Thank
not
you.
going to respond.
That's what I couldn't hear. I didn't know what you said about him. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Ken, you said that you George Schober, for the record, and I'm asking Mr. Pryor a question now. You said you witnessed 2 accidents. Did you actually witness these accidents, and do you know the approximate date of the accidents?
I didn't actually see them happen. I saw the aftermath. So the 2 summers ago, my neighbor had texted me about the accident. And when I got home, the guy had drove off, but the stone wall and the brush, there was skid marks in the lawn. The other one that was earlier, the 2 cars, I showed up as the people were getting out of the cars. I heard it from my house, and I walked over there.
Now, when was that approximately? Do you know?
I think it was 2017, because I had my current truck when it happened.
And are you aware if the police were called on either one of those accidents?
The one with the 2 vehicles, the police showed up. The other one, the guy basically just took off.
Okay. So, Ms. Byrne, again, George Schober, Ms. Byrne, how do you check for accidents in the vicinity of the facility that you're performing the traffic study on?
Yeah, Colleen Burke for the record. We use the Connecticut Crash Data Repository, which is a compilation of accident reports that are entered into the system on a statewide database. So if an accident occurred and didn't actually get reported and the report wasn't filed in the database, we would have no record of it.
And how far back did you go in checking this database?
It's a 5-year study period. That ended January 2021, which is the most recent data that's available.
So you go 5 years back from January 2021?
Correct.
Thank you. Any idea, George Schober again, any idea if the police were called on an accident in 2018 in the vicinity, why it wouldn't show up?
Colleen Byrne for the record, there's obviously inaccuracies in reporting. The report might have never made it through the police department. The officer may have not finished it. They might have dropped it. There's reasons reports don't get into the database, but typically if a report was filed and completed, and it would make its way into the database.
Okay. Thank you. I think we're done with Ms. Byrne. I'm not going to say that we're done with questions for Mr. Ussery as we proceed with our presentation of the deficiencies. But obviously we can't hold him here, and Jay wants to leave, he can leave. But we may have further questions as we go.
Well, if you have further questions, you want to ask them now because we're going. We're not stopping here.
No, we're ready to keep going.
Presenting, the applicant's done presenting, so you can just.
And we're gonna continue marching on then. Okay. So with that, I'm gonna ask Mike to pick up in his presentation.
Sure. So, Mike Schober again for the record. Really, that was the back half of my presentation, so we got that out of the way, luckily. So the first half is kind of more broad-scale issues here, rather than the nitty-gritty of what is missing in the application. So the number one most important probably definition I think in the regulations is section 1.4, which is any use not specifically identified as permitted is prohibited. So unless the authority is granted, it's prohibited. Also, under 8.2e, nothing in the regulation shall be interpreted as authorization for approval or continuation of anything which was basically never legal in the first place, right? So if something wasn't legal before, just because it's these new regulations aren't permitting it to keep going forward. Going off that as well, under 2.2, the distinction between non-conforming and unlawful use, and I promise you this is just 6 very short definitions up front which are important to the rest of this. So I'm not going to bore you here with definition after definition. So 2.2, the distinction between non-conforming and unlawful, and this is for uses, for buildings, for anything along those lines. Non-conforming is something that was in conformance with it or was being used prior to the regulations that went in effect, which was actually back in 1945, or unlawful is something that was never legal. If it was never permitted under the regulations, it's still not permitted now, okay? So, really, the couple big issues here are with the special use permits. There's one existing, and it's not lawful in my opinion. And if that special use permit is maintained, yes.
We're not contemplating or here to discuss the pre-existing special use permit at this time.
Okay, and so then my point is that if the original special use permit is maintained, the new one cannot be granted as a matter of law. And the reason for that is that you are allowed one principal use for your piece of property. Your piece of property can either be, for example, they claim it's a farm, and let's just assume let's assume that it is a farm, just for the purpose of this. The previous special use permit is for an outdoor recreation facility. So either it's an outdoor recreation facility, in which case that special use permit is well, it's still not lawful for other reasons, but that is in effect. I guess I'll phrase it that way. But then you don't get the farm winery off that, because so you get one principal use, and then an accessory use is anything that's subordinate or incidental to that principal use. So a farm winery cannot be, under the regulations, an incidental use to an outdoor recreation facility. It's one or the other. And really where this comes into conflict is in, for example, is in the curtailment. So with the previous special use permit, granting hours of operation well into the night, and I have a copy somewhere of this mess, till 11 p.m. Sunday through Thursday until 12 a.m. on Friday and Saturday, whereas a farm winery is only allowed to operate from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Sunday to Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thursday through Saturday. So just, that is one part where it's in conflict, but just as a matter of law, it's either a farm or it's an outdoor recreation center. It's one of the two. And whether it is a farm, a farm has to contain at least 5 acres with at least 3 used principally for agricultural purposes. Now, we don't know from at least, so it may be a farm. The only proof I've heard on this matter so far is that the assessor has field card lists part of it as tillable land, which doesn't make it a farm under your regulations. It's not clear that it is a farm, and again, even if it is a farm, then the old special use permit has to be rejected, and you do have the power to do that at any point under, I think, Section 9. Regardless, it still only has one principal use though, and so we don't have clear testimony yet that there are 3 acres used principally for agricultural purposes. So even if it is, it can't be classified as a farm as its principal use unless there's some evidence to that fact. At this point, there isn't any evidence to that fact. What evidence we've had so far is that there's 2 acres on an abutting property that's also owned by them that is used to grow the grapes. So I think the commission ought to know, is this actually a farm? And if it's not a farm, then it can't have a farm winery. So based on your comment on not looking at the original special use permit, I take it you don't want to hear my whole argument on why a tent is barred, but just as a matter of law, a tent is also barred. It's barred by the doctrine of collateral estoppel, which basically states that an issue, in this case, the tent, an issue of whether a tent can be on this property, if that's been fully litigated and decided, as it has been under a case that Worthington Pond Farm had in, I think, 2004, if that's been litigated and decided, that issue comes to rest and can't be reopened. It works if it's the same party or if it's party in privity, and the easiest way to create privity is in contract. Basically, if you sell or anything, you're in this legal relationship, and so a tent is just, it's barred by that. And I've got a full analysis here. I'm going to enter this into the record after my notes, so you're free to read the case law. I can read it to you now if you want, but I presume you don't want to hear me read case law to you.
You might want to mention the basic facts of, like the George Schober, of the court decision at issue here, because we're talking about a tent that existed on the Worthington Pond property, and the court ordered that that tent could not be there. So I think you do want to talk about that.
Sure.
Can I just interject for a second? Are you testifying as an expert?
Can you just state your name?
Attorney Sean Clark on behalf of the Murdochs. Are you testifying as an expert or as a fact witness here?
He's helping me represent Ken Pryor. He's assistant. He's my legal clerk.
I give him some latitude for that perspective, and I understand he's your son, so I'm good with that, George. But if he's providing opinions, legal opinions, then certainly this is an application for a special use permit to present facts and opposing facts about the application that's before this commission. And I think we're getting a little bit far astray. As Carl probably, and I would have said correctly noted, this is not to revisit the whole special use permit application. And certainly I can go down the road of commenting on that and giving you my legal opinion about that. But since then, the commission's well aware this was something that was completely prohibited until the commission revised the regulations last May. So they can talk about collateral estoppel. Collateral estoppel doesn't apply to this issue for many, many different reasons, but this is just getting so far astray from what the application is really all about at this point in time. We're just wasting the commission's time, we're wasting my client's time, we're wasting my time, and certainly they have a right to be heard, but they have the right to be heard on this application, not on something that happened in 2004, not on something that happened with Dan Roulier, and on the other issues, I'll come back and comment on his comments about those issues, because I think there's a lot of inaccuracies, but I think the commission has the right to control this hearing and not let it go on and on and on forever. We'll be here all night long if that's going to be the case.
This tent is this, George Schober, this tent is this application. They're looking for a tent, and we're here to tell you they can't have a tent for a number of reasons, the first of which Mike's trying to explain now.
But it's not because there was an application before this commission with other parties under a different set of regulations in 2004 that the court had to adjudicate in two different cases on two different issues that has nothing to do with this application. So it's up to the commission. If you want to hear all this, that's fine, but a lot of it's irrelevant, it's immaterial to this application.
We'd like to put our objections to this application into the record fully. We'd like to put in our testimony. We'd like to adequately represent our client, and part of that is to look at past history, because that history can repeat itself, because that special use permit that was illegally granted in the first place is still in existence, being used now. In fact, it was used on December 4th at 11 o'clock to 11:30 on that Saturday night, destroying the peaceful use of my client's property. Nowhere else in town can that happen in a residential zone, except here at 11:30 at night. It could go till midnight. So past history is happening now, and that's what we're addressing.
But George, you're trying to rehash a permit that was actually found by the court to be legal for the uses that were being made of it. You may
That's not true. That's not what they found.
It's your legal opinion. You're entitled to that.
No, that's not what they found. It's not a legal opinion. You read the case. It's not what they found.
I've read the cases 100 times, George. They didn't discontinue the special use permit. They didn't say
that wasn't before them. They didn't rule on it. That was not before them.
So then if they didn't rule on it, it can't be collateral estoppel because it wasn't necessarily
They
adjudicated.
ruled on the tent. The tent was adjudicated.
But that was the tent as part of that application. These rules, these regulations, even the current regulations would say, even if this commission denies the request for the tent at this point, we could submit another application down the road and come back before it and submit it with different conditions and different factors as far as that's the case. Something happened in 2004 is irrelevant. You're just trying to waste everybody's time.
I'm not trying to waste anybody's time. You've now wasted more time talking about this than Mike would have to have finished what he was saying about this.
If the commission doesn't want to narrow the focus, that's up to the commission. But I just feel
No, we'd like to narrow the focus to the application at hand, the winery, not in a pre-existing special use permit that ran with the property.
It still exists.
Yeah, but it runs with the property.
Until somebody actually challenges it.
Until somebody
successfully challenges it.
Right, it hasn't been challenged.
Successfully challenges it or
waives it.
Waives it. There you go.
But as of right now, it's a legal right that was pertinent to this property, that's part of this property, and it's really not before the commission as to whether or not that's a legal right or not a legal right, George.
It's before this commission because you're expanding it. You don't get two special use permits. You're expanding the
totally
first
disagree.
one, and that's what it says in Section 9 of the
We
regulation.
wouldn't, Jill
totally
Conklin, for the
disagree.
record, we wouldn't be here because we're fully aware that there's an existing special use permit. We wouldn't be here.
George, you can have different special use permits under these regulations for different farming uses. So the notion that you can only have one special use permit. Mr. J. Usury talked about how there was cattle on this property, okay? And if you look at the definitional section of what can happen on a farm, if we had cattle there and we had to stockpile waste, you'd have to come to the zoning commission and get a special use permit to deal with that waste. But that doesn't include us in a different area of the farm to having a farm winery. It doesn't. And the definition of farm by the regulations under 2.2, page 10 of the regulations says it's a tract of land with 5 or more acres with a minimum of 3 acres principal use for agricultural purposes. We've heard about haying. We've heard about maple syrup. We've heard about wine. We've heard about grapes. And the farm includes the premises used for the raising and keeping of livestock and other domestic animals when permitted by these regulations. The term farm includes farm buildings and other buildings accessory thereto, nurseries, orchard, ranges, greenhouse, hoop houses, and other temporary structures and other structures primarily for the raising and incidents of the ordinary farming operation and the sale of agricultural or horticultural products. It's pretty broad. So I'm all for listening to what it's Mike, right? Mike Chilbert?
Yes.
Mike, I'm all for listening to what Mike has to say, but let's talk about this application.
If I may, so Mike Schober for the record, a number of those things that you just mentioned, though, Mr. Ursary, I believe you said a number of those, though, that you just listed haven't been used for several years. the thing is, like, the facts keep changing from our end of the spectrum. The facts on what's being used, what isn't, what's happening, it just keeps shifting. So like the cows, for 1 second they're here, and currently now they're not, and now they're back. You know, so it's just really hard to narrow it down and say, yes, there are 3 acres being used. The grapes are on adjacent property. If we're talking about the facts of this property, the grapes right now, sure, they're proposed in the future. Right now, they're not on the property. They don't count towards that 3 acres. So I'm not saying that. You know, I'm not saying that the 3 acres you don't have it. You know, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not here to, you know, but it and quite frankly, the special use permit does matter because once again, that old special use permit, if you read, it's not for a farm. It's not granting any of this for a farm. It's a subordinate use of the primary use of outdoor recreation area. I won't bore everybody and keep going on, but the plain and simple fact is that you get a primary use for your property. It's either a farm or it's an outdoor recreation area. These 2 special use permits cannot coexist.
If we are going to continue to agree on the legal issues, my suggestion, Madam Chairperson, would be require the parties to file briefs, because that's when you can make legal arguments. But we haven't even gotten to that point because we're still arguing about whether or not we're going to hear facts from the opponents in terms of what their opposition is. So if we could just be like Joe Friday and say just the facts, let's get on with the facts, and then we can argue over that. Because there's a lot of things we could argue about in terms of the facts, but if we're going to argue about the legal conclusions, that's probably best left for us to file some kind of summary with.
We cannot, Jill Conklin for the record, we cannot argue a legal matter here. We don't even have our attorney here with us tonight.
Right.
We're just looking for the things that you want to discuss about this application, not a previous.
That's what they want to discuss.
This application, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we are discussing, and we need to get into the record all of our. This is our chance.
So,
the public hearing may close
well, that's
tonight.
what we're going to do.
So the fact that your attorney's not here is unfortunate, but we have to get everything in tonight that we want to in case you close the public hearing. And some of that is our information so that we have a record that we can use as to why you can't approve a tent, because that goes in my brief. And if I don't get it in, I have a problem. So I need to do my job. That's all we're trying to do.
So,
is it in?
I
just put the case in.
And what would that be called, Jordan? What was that going to be marked as, Madam?
Exhibit Q.
Q?
And I don't know what it's called because I just put it in, so I don't have it in front of me. The caption of the case?
Well,
sure.
Farm.
It is Worthington Pond Farm LLC v. Town of Somers Zoning Commission et al. It's docket number CVO4 40118S. Decision date 7706. I don't have a Westlaw here. I printed it off. I think it came off.
That's Judge Gleason's decision on which part of it?
It's the decision on the tent. So there were 2 separate decisions. Right. This is the tent one.
Right. But it's Judge Gleason's decision.
It's Judge Gleason's decision on the tent.
Just on the tent, not on the other issue.
Just on the tent. Okay, Mike, continue.
And I apologize to the commission with all the delays. This landed right during finals week for me, so I'm on about 2 hours of sleep and a lot of caffeine. So I apologize that I'm not articulating myself well. What else is there anything else you want to get in? Or?
On the tent? On that case?
Sure. I mean, so the court basically found that the commission was proper in denying the tent because the tent wasn't in accessory use. I think that was the reasoning. The plaintiff argues that the commission improperly considered the use of the property in denying and modifying the plaintiff's site plans, and the commission member, Marie Burnett, said, I'll make a motion to deny the tent due to the increase of the intensity of the use of on the property, and it is not an outdoor recreation facility. Now, I mean, I suppose there are some counter arguments. I'm not saying that this is fully one, a closed case, that this is pure collateral estoppel and that there's no arguments against it. But between that and then also, I mean, if the tent's going to have any seats under section 4.4, accessory uses and structures, it limits, 4.4C4 limits outdoor seating to business zones, not residential zones. And this farm is, if it is a farm, the property at issue is in a recreational zone. It's not in, or sorry, residential zone, not in a business zone. I mean, I think that's.
So one of the concerns, George Schober, one of the concerns that my client has is that there'll be no control over the use of this tent. Once that tent is set up there, who's to say what's going to go on in there? And that is a concern, and the court has already said that functions can't be held there. Our zoning regulations, those in existence at the time and those in existence now, our current regulations, don't allow for a tent to be set up and used as a banquet facility in a residential zone. I don't know about other zones, but we're concerned with the residential zone. And that is a huge concern here. Where is the check and the balance to ensure that if this tent is permitted, which we believe for other reasons it can't be as well, but if it is, who's to say that there isn't going to be a wedding held in there, or a wedding reception, or a party? We have no control over that. It's in the middle of that facility. So we don't know what goes on there, but we know what did go on when that tent was located right where they're proposing it's located, and that was wedding receptions and other events.
Oh, and then, so on Mike Schroeder, for the record, tasting rooms and events, they're not permitted under the regulations. In fact, they were presumably considered and rejected based on all the previous regulations. You're going to put these in?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is on Thursday, April 8, 2021, the special meeting minutes of the Zoning Commission. Carl Walton made a motion to approve application number 20-015 of the Summers Zoning Commission to adopt the proposed zoning regulations effective May 1st, 2021 with the following modifications, and modification 3 is removing tasting rooms from the definition section. Again, anything that's not permitted in the regulations is prohibited under section 1.4. So they were in section, I believe, 6.12 or 6.13 is where they were in the proposed.
And then they were added back in when we considered that as a use.
They're not currently in it.
No, they're not in the winery regulation because we were told that they needed to be removed in it as a curtailment. I believe, is my recollection. I could be wrong. It's been quite a while and back and forth and everything else, but the advice that we got from our consultant and the town attorney was that as a curtailment it needed to be removed or else it would be automatically approved along with the approval of the state. And for that matter it was removed from the regulation, but under the curtailment.
I just searched the PDF and so tasting doesn't appear anywhere in the PDF.
What PDF?
This is the zoning regulations.
Well, I'm just going to go back to recollection because I know, and most of the people in this room were at those hearings, and when we had the final discussion about the approval of the zoning regulations, it was upon the recommendation of the consultant on the zoning regulations about the removal of everything that was on the second page of 6.12. However, it was the recommendation, his recommendation, that was going to be included as part of what was the curtailment and the authorization that Carl's talking about under 6.12B2, 6.12B2, because those otherwise activities would have been authorized by section 30-16 of the Connecticut General Statutes. So what the commission was doing at that point in time was to say, we're going to keep the generic right to curtail anything that would be permitted under 30-16 as a condition of what the regulations would be. And I believe it was Madam Chair who then made a motion that we were going to approve everything on the first page, and everything on the second page was not going to be included in that.
And then Jill Conklin, for the record, we added that because we would be tweaking these at a special use permit application, that's what
They would be
the
dealt
intent
with.
was.
That they would be determined upon application,
individually.
whether or not it would be an allowable function. I want to say curtailment, but
I mean,
A use.
yes, because you've got like almost 100 acres. Somebody else could only have 5 acres over here, or somebody could be on a state road in a commercial zone. So we were going to take each applicant separately and look at this, because they would all require, it says they require a special use permit. And that is what we're doing.
My George Silver, my recollection was that, and we're going to put in several draft zoning regulations of 6.12 along with those minutes into the record. But my recollection is that what
we really only need the one that was finally approved.
Right,
though,
the
George.
final approval is the one we need.
Well, I'm putting all these in, and so the reason I am is to show that there was a lot of discussion about tasting rooms and events and what could and couldn't occur at a winery or a brewery or distillery. And in the end, it was, let's get these regulations done. Now, this is my recollection. Let's get these regulations done, and then we'll have a workshop, and we'll modify. And in fact, the Murdochs had actually submitted a text amendment to allow for tasting rooms and events and such. I don't remember exactly what was there. And then they withdrew it. That was after the regulations were approved.
It was concurrent.
So, okay, then they
Yeah.
withdrew, but there's nothing in the regulations that allows for tasting rooms.
Well, and Madam Chair, Attorney Clark again for the record, we could go back to January 20th, if I have a good memory for dates. January 20th of 2020 was when we had the first meeting with respect to the amended zoning regulations. And then, of course, it did a roller coaster ride. It went up and down. You guys had some special meetings. You guys had some private meetings. You guys had some meetings with the zoning consultant. Again, we're only here to talk about a farm winery under 6.12 as it was approved by this commission back in May based upon the regulation that's in effect right now. I mean, we want to talk about the regulations in 2004. Now we want to talk about the regulations before. Now we want to introduce everything that took place since January of 2020. Let's talk about this application. The rest of it's irrelevant at this point.
See, Attorney Clark, George Silver just doesn't get it. This has to do with this application. You're not allowed to approve a tasting room, and we're putting in the documentation that helps to show that. We're building the record. So we're done with that issue, by the way, but if he wants to continue.
But with all due respect, Attorney Silver, if you want to amend the regulations, follow the regulations themselves. Submit a request for a text amendment to the regulations and change it. But this application is under the regulations as they stood and as they were approved in May.
If I may, but those regulations don't, Mike Schober, those regulations don't permit a tasting room. That's like, under 1.4.
I would respectfully, again, Attorney Clark for the record, I would respectfully disagree. Having seen these people discuss all of these issues over the course of the past almost 2 years now, just in terms of the public discussion of it, maybe longer, I don't know. But having seen the discussions, the curtailment section that I've noted, it's under 6.12B2, was how this commission, in its legislative authority, acted in terms of how it was going to address tasting rooms and other issues under section 30-16 of the regulations. I stand by that. I don't want to waste any more time, but I think that's the record. If you think it's differently, you're entitled to your opinion, but I don't think that's what the record would show.
If I may, just briefly, section 1.4, any use not specifically identified in these regulations that are permitted in
Is
a
expressly
zoning
prohibited.
district.
Like every zoning regulation in the world says that in the beginning.
Right, by special use permit, though it specifically states by special use permit as one of the things shall be deemed to be prohibited. Like a special use permit, that may have been the exchanges that happened, I was not present. That may have been the discussions, the deliberations over what would happen. But if it's not in the current regulations, and it's not, if the current regulations don't grant a tasting room, they don't grant a tasting room.
Well, again, Attorney Clark, for the record, if we looked at the history of the regulations, we would know that the prior regulation on this issue would have had a blanket prohibition on anything to suggest anything about a farm winery, period. I think that's record's clear. I can say that pretty without question. I think even George would agree with me on that. However, that regulation was modified along with all the other zoning regulations, which your father has filed an appeal to the Tallinn Judicial District saying that there was improper notice about those regulations to everybody. But those are the regulations that are in place right now. Those are the regulations that were approved, and I stand by my comments earlier otherwise.
Just give us 1 second. Yeah, I think, well.
Right?
This is the one side.
Yeah, it's not. The whole. I know.
I think we got copies.
This is
Yeah. That's okay.
Are you, George Schober, are you, just a question regarding exhibits, are you marking all that as one or each as an individual?
Just one.
R.
Is that
Yeah.
that's okay?
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep track.
Yes.
So we're going to put this in as whatever comes after R.
S.
Thank you.
Which is
That's, it's just some legal notes and application deficiencies.
so it's your
It's ours.
legal notes is how you'd like it titled.
Sure.
Legal notes of Mike Schober,
No.
of George Schober?
Of
Attorney
George C.
Schober,
Schober, PC.
Okay.
Right. They're firm notes.
So you're waiving privilege?
As to that, sure. You want a copy? We'll
I
send
would
you
want
one.
a copy. You haven't given me any.
It's Exhibit S,
Exhibit S?
firm notes, legal notes.
Okay, do you have anything else, George?
Yes, we have a lot.
Oh, well, let's keep going because it's been 2.5 hours and I'm ready to
Okay.
go.
Hear more.
Are you done? You're done, Mike.
It's not back
Great.
and forth.
Yeah, we're not going to be doing any more back and forth. I mean, that's really not the way to do a public. I know you say different.
I just want
you to address us with your.
He keeps interrupting.
Well, he's not going to. I just want you to address us.
He's spending more time objecting. than
Address
we're
this
putting
commission up
in.
here and.
Okay, so I'd like my client to testify to finish on sheet flow and the other items. We lost the traffic consultant, which is fine. Or we could wait for my client and see whether I have anything more for Jay, because he looks like he's falling asleep over there.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. So this is I have a question for the applicant, and that is the Sugar House. Oh, I do have a couple more things for Jay as well. The Sugar House was enclosed. Were permits pulled for that?
Sure.
Building permits were pulled to enclose the Sugar House?
We owned the property at the time, it was under ruling.
Okay. One of the regulations, now let me get to it. It's 100 feet on the buildings. In a previous meeting, it was mentioned that the waste from the grapes would be composted. Is that correct? Where will that be composted?
woods, or we've made arrangements with some farmers who wish to take on from us.
When you say woods, do you mean woods of your woods on your property? Is that a yes?
Yes, sure, that's a possibility.
Okay, just trying to make sure everything gets recorded. Because the regulations require that be shown on the plan as to where that's going to occur, what's going to happen to the waste, and how will it be moved from the winery where it is produced to wherever it's going. What's the process of moving that?
Question to you.
A wheelbarrow. No, I don't know. I'm just.
Well, I'm asking the
Well, you're not
applicant.
asking them because we're not having them answer back and forth. I don't want to do that.
Okay,
I just want you to ask.
So
then
I have
they'll
the
address
right
it.
I have the right to do that. If you're telling me I can't, I'll ask you, and that'll be just another basis for an appeal if it happens. And I had talked to Jen about this, that I'm disappointed Attorney Landolin is not here, because I had this discussion with him when I was told I couldn't do this,
What did
and
he
he
say to you?
agrees with me, because you may have not seen it, but that doesn't mean that it's not legal and proper. So I'll do whatever you want, though.
I
So
believe you said that at the last meeting that we were at. I mean, we can get him on the phone if it's dire.
I mean, it's actually quicker if I ask people. The back and forth that took a long time was the legal objections. But the actual questions...
Because this is just a public hearing. It's not really a court of law. We're not like...
It's quasi.
It is quasi.
So,
So you
again,
just
you
need
can
to-
ask questions.
And he can
if
answer it right then?
Right, if it
Go
just
ahead then.
speeds
Let's-
the process rather than
It will
have...
Are you
certainly
comfortable
speed
with
the
that,
process.
Sean?
Question?
Yeah, if I have an objection, I'll tell you. I'm
Okay.
not shy about that, but it's up to the commission as to how it wants to run the meeting, and if Mr. Schober is gonna ask questions of the Murdochs or the applicants directly, that's fine, and I'll have the right to do the same thing with respect to his clients.
And,
my
and
client's
again,
not the
he doesn't,
applicant.
and the applicant,
But
the
they're gonna
applicant
testify,
doesn't have to
George.
answer if he
Yeah,
doesn't
he's
want
not
to.
the applicant, though.
But if he's gonna testify and give it.
Who's not the applicant? He's the
asking
applicant.
questions about that.
My client's not the applicant.
No, he's the applicant. I'm just
Understood.
saying, if he doesn't want to answer the question, he doesn't have to answer the question.
I understand, but if you're offering testimony of
You have
your
to be
client,
open
I have
to
the right to ask him a question.
cross-examination.
No, you don't.
Then you have the right to ask him a question. Is that what you're saying?
He doesn't, but I'm not going to have any issue with it, more than likely. So things work a little different with land use matters, Sean.
George, please.
George,
Don't-
that was
don't your
uncalled for,
comments.
George.
Yeah, that-
Please stop.
Well, this is the problem.
But that was uncalled for, George.
This is the problem, though. He doesn't know what he's
It's
doing.
not a problem, George. Just stop, and it
George,
won't be a
So,
problem.
Mr. Murdoch,
Are we taping this? I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
this
Yes,
is
we are.
recorded.
This is on the record, so this
Yes.
is a public statement about my opinion.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr.
So-
Murdoch, how much waste will be generated?
Defined waste.
Compost waste.
Depends on what production volume you're talking about, current, future. I don't-
Currently, how much waste is generated?
We could estimate 5 to 10 yards
Over what time period?
over a
Year.
seasonal harvest.
That would be a year.
Yeah,
And where, and how will it be disposed of?
well, we said we would be composting it.
Okay, and how will it get to the compost place? Where it will be
What was
composted?
it? A truck,
A truck?
back home,
I'm sorry?
a
Bucket
Either a
loader?
payloader or a
Payloader.
pickup truck.
Okay, thank you. how is trash removed from the site?
The contract with USA Hauling.
And is there a dumpster on site?
Yeah.
Is that a yes? I'm there.
Yeah.
And where is that located?
In the parking lot.
Is it shown on the site plan?
Probably not.
I'm sorry?
Probably not.
Should be.
What's that?
Should be.
And when, during what hours does USA Hauling typically pick that up? What time of day?
I don't know. That's only once a month right now. Whatever they feel like.
I'm sorry?
I have no idea.
Okay. And how about, you must take deliveries of certain items by truck, is that correct?
We will.
What types of items will you take delivery of by truck?
Bottles, juice, grapes, when we don't have enough juice.
And typically, what size truck would that be?
Anywhere from, I don't know. What is it?
A box truck up to a 40-foot truck.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what matters. Yeah, we've had box trucks deliver the grapes. We've had, in the end of 18 years, deliver holes for us, too. So.
And are they able to make that turn into the driveway okay? Is that a yes?
Yeah.
And typically, what time of day are those deliveries made?
Business hours.
Which would be what?
Between 9 and 5.
Between 9 and 5? Monday to Friday? That's yes? It's hard for the...
Yes.
Section 3.3B1 and 7 of the regulations, which have to do with residential zones, state, and this is for Jay, that accessory buildings shall not be located in the front yard of any lot unless located in the rear half of the lot. And they have to be located on a farm, I believe it is, at least 100 feet from all property lines. Now, I think I scaled out the Sugar Shack at about 55 feet from the property line. I don't think the Sugar Shack can be used for what they wish to use it for. I think it's too close, and you're changing the use from the maple sugaring to the winery. So we would object to that.
You're saying they need to move the building?
I think they do. Or they need to get a variance. But I don't think it can be, this application can be approved for that use at that building. You have a non-conforming building that you're changing the use on.
Could I ask for clarification of that? Excuse me, for the record, J. Ersby, J.R. Russo. I just want to make sure I understand what George was saying here.
So if I go to 3.3B7 states accessory buildings on a farm for other than housing farm animals shall be at least 100 feet from all property lines. So presuming this is a farm, which it would have to be if there's going to be a farm winery, this building has to be at least 100 feet from the property line.
If it's housing farm animals?
No, for other than housing farm animals, must be. Accessory buildings on a farm for other than housing farm animals. So apparently, I know it doesn't make sense, I'm just telling you what it says.
Again, Jay Ersby for the record, I think that's a typo. I don't think that's correct. I think it means if it's housing farm animals, it needs to be 100 feet from the property line. If it is not, it has to meet the setback requirement.
I'm just reading what's here.
It's a regulation that's in many, many
It
towns.
is either way, but
Yeah. I agree with you, George. It doesn't make sense.
So B1 states accessory buildings shall not be located in the front yard of any lot unless located in the rear half of the lot. So the way I read that regulation is you take the 89 acres, 90 acres, you cut it in half, so the front 45 is, and then it's, the main building is the warming house, so nothing can be located in front of the warming house. That's how I read it. You're shaking your head, Jay, but am I misinterpreting this?
Again, Jay Ursery for the record, I think the front yard that we're talking about here is the front setback requirement from Mountain Road. We have frontage on Mountain Road, so therefore the front yard would be measured from the street line of Mountain Road being 50 feet, which wouldn't get us back to the warming house or the sugar shack.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that.
He's saying if you measure from the border of the road back onto the front of the lot, if there's a 50-foot setback.
There is, but there's a definition of front yard, and if we look at that,
How many feet back is it, Jay, approximately?
Well, for the record, Jay Ursery, J.R. Russo and Associates.
Front of the
frontage is along Mountain Road is 255 feet. The first leg coming back on the east is 209 feet. The front yard is 50 feet. So the front yard is located up here somewhere near the gate.
Right, but where is the sugar shack in relationship to that?
The sugar shack is way back here.
Okay.
There are no buildings in front of the front yard requirement. Everything's behind it.
okay, I'm going to move on for a second. We're going to try to find the front yard definition. I'm sorry? Thank you. Well, I'm in 2.2. 2.2 where?
Well, if you look at the definition of, I'm sorry, Attorney Clark, just trying to help Mr. Chevrolet here.
Yes.
On page 18, if you look at the definition of lot, because you can define yard or lot, but it says of any lot. Lot is a defined term, and lot basically says to be occupied by one principal or primary building. So again, I don't think that that's the intent of these regulations. This is somebody's not living there. This is not an occupied, this is a use being made of the property. I think the intent of what you're suggesting under 3.31, B1 is if it was an occupied lot, like a residential lot, where you have a building line from a street line that says that basically accessory buildings would typically have to be in the rear of the property. I think that's the purpose and intent of that particular regulation, but I'll leave that to the children.
We found front yard. The area extending across the full, it's on page 27, under yard front. The area extending across the full width of a lot and lying between the front lot line and the principal structure on the same lot. So the principal structure arguably is the warming house. So anything in front of the warming house is the front yard. Therefore, the sugar shack can't be there. That's how I read this. And I just pointed out.
Again, for the record, Jay Ersby, J.R. Russo, I understand what George is saying, and I understand what the regulation says, and I think it pertains to residential uses in residential homes. Not this particular use.
But we're in a residential
Zone.
Yeah, thank you.
But there's no residential building
on this property.
on this particular lot.
There may not be. But there's a primary building, one could argue.
One could argue it's the sugar shack.
I suppose, with no bathrooms and...
What came first, the sugar shack or the warming house? I believe the sugar shack.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
Ken Pryor for the record. I just want to state that when I look out my dining room and living room, I'm looking right at the back of the Sugar Shack. Now, in years past, it used to be just stacked wood back there. Now we got a chiller, all the accessory stuff that they're not putting in the building out back. So it looks like a bunch of garbage. Shouldn't that be shielded from the residents? I mean, it's a production area. You would think it would have to be shielded.
Well, it does, George Hilbert, it does have to be shielded under the regulations. It's it's in the 7 section. In the landscaping section, there's a provision that building has to be screened. Yes, with evergreens and/or a fence. Ken, do you want to continue with what you have? I may be done with Jay.
Now, you wanted me to talk about, Ken Pryor for the record, talk about the sheet flow and drainage from the vineyard down the Gillette Brook has been a problem since day one, made worse from the removal of trees and grading of the vineyard area. In 2000, when the facility started, the runoff came off the gravel driveway, ran down Mountain Road, and crossed at the same spot where the vineyard is now crossing, draining across the road. Now that the driveway is paved, that water flow is even more, and it's combining with the water flow off the vineyard, and it's actually caused erosion across the street. Where the new blacktop is, the town has had actually filled it in there with riprap and gravel, so it's not taking the blacktop off the road. As a reminder, this facility was started for bird watching, hiking, and so forth. Throughout the years, expansion has gone on, and it's gone beyond what it was proposed for. He's had events with 800 guests just for breakfast. We had
He being
Dan earlier.
Yep.
airplane flyovers until 2006, when this was all brought to a stop with the lawsuit, getting rid of the tent, so he wasn't allowed to do indoor events. And it's been quiet since then. There hasn't been cows. The Sugar Shack hasn't been running. There hasn't been any events of substance since then. It's been nice. As Mr. Ursary said, that the park lots are grown over. I sent and told recently what the new owners want to do is revive this and expand the activity and increase the impact to the area. They're already marketing wineries and not wineries, weddings, at some other events which we had turned in some information about. By adding a special use permit with conflicting standards, it's almost impossible to enforce. When we talked about the hours conflicting, weddings, and so forth. What we call this in the Navy is mission creep, and that's what's happening. It started off something small, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger to equate to spot zoning. If we keep going, what's going to be asked for next year or 5 years from down the line? It's a residential area. It was supposed to be kept low impact, a few people, and now we're talking about a big winery and the wine trail. I just urge this commission to please don't allow history to repeat itself here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
So we're almost done, except we have a lot to put into the record. So let me do that now. I have a notice of violation dated December 7, 2021 regarding the lights that Ms. Roy sent to, the zoning enforcement officer sent to the Murdochs. Mike, can you write down what these are? And I believe that would be T.
T.
Thank you. I didn't put the regulations attached to it. Your zoning.
Yeah.
It's just T is the notice of violation.
Lights.
Lights. We have the existing special use permit to enter.
Same objection on relevancy before the Commission Attorney Clark.
There's really not any objecting to what goes into the record. This is a Department of Health regarding salt in drinking water, groundwater.
What is that?
What's the time period of that, George?
All right.
Just
This
quick
is
question.
sodium and chloride in well water health considerations, September 2018, from the Department of Public Health. And it's a 4-page document.
Does it pertain to Mountain Road or Summers Mountain Properties?
This is just a general, but this is allowed in the record.
So that would be B with the
Z.
same objection?
This is the Town of Summers driveway ordinance. This is the Connecticut Department of Transportation
Hold
High.
on a second. Well,
Sure.
that's going to be W.
Correct.
It's Town of Summers driveway ordinance. Is there a particular number or section?
Chapter 104.
It's the whole ordinance. Next is the Connecticut Department of Transportation Highway Design Manual 2003 edition, including revisions to February 2013. This is a several hundred page document. I'm including the pages, well, it doesn't have a page, 7-11, which is sight distance and stopping sight distance. It's a chart for sight distance. And decision sight distance, 7-21.
X.
Yes.
Same objection.
I have the minutes, the zoning commission minutes from June 28th of 2004. This is the Town of Summers Zoning Commission. It's a 14-page document.
Again, why? I don't understand the relevance of that.
So with a zoning matter, you can put anything you want pretty much into the record. There's no objection as to relevance. You can make an objection as to relevance. It doesn't matter. They go in. They build the record. And that's how it works.
Sure, I understand, but I'm just saying that I object that it has nothing to do with this application. Go ahead.
So I have 4 sheets of the survey that the Town of Summers commissioned from Benish Engineers in, I believe, Glastonbury.
When?
This is for Mountain Road, and they are the Mountain Road Reconstruction Project.
2016?
To November 2016. This particular sheet is sheet number 54, and it's just above Worthington Pond property. And if you scale this out, I was wrong, I thought it was 9%. It's 12 to 13% grade over a large section of the road. So we're going to put this into the record.
So you're just offering the sheets but no other testimony on those sheets? Because you can introduce them all as one exhibit as far as I'm concerned.
I'm going to introduce each one separately.
Okay.
So what are they going to be, Madam?
Z.
That would be Z?
Correct.
That's the first one?
Yes, sheet 54.
Okay.
Sheet 53 shows the entranceway, and marked on there is the approximate distance of where Mr. Pryor, 270 feet, could see the entranceway to Worthington Pond.
So they were marked by him or marked by the engineer?
No, marked by him.
So those were noted
By Mr. Pryor?
Yes.
Mr. Pryor?
Yes. And actually in sheet 54 is the same thing. And I guess I should ask him about that. So when he comes back,
Just say yes to him.
so Mr. Pryor, I am going to show you a survey of Mountain Road. This is sheet 54, which is exhibit
No, I don't think we can.
54.
It is Exhibit Z.
Z, and You see that marking there? Is that where you could see the entranceway to Worthington Pond from as you come down Mountain Road from above?
Ken Pryor, for the record, yes, that's where I could see the driveway from.
And on sheet 53, you'll see the driveway for Worthington, and you'll see another mark in the road. And is that where you could see the driveway coming up Mountain Road?
Ken Pryor, for the record, yes.
Okay.
So sheet 53 is double A.
Okay. Oh, I wondered where this writing came from. That's you. You're right. I have sheet 52, which is just below sheet 53, and on this, it shows, if you scale this out, that Mountain Road is as narrow as 18 feet in a place. And there are other places, but we're not putting those maps in. Just to give a general indication. Huh?
In a place relative to the applicant?
It's down below. So it's just Mountain Road in general. And we're going to put in sheet 43, just down by Halley Lane. And again, if you scale some of this out, you'll get to about 12%. It's just to give an idea of the grade of Mountain Road. Now,
Jordan, those were all the same sheets that you introduced in front of the Liquor Control Commission, just so I understand?
I don't remember. They probably were. Did I introduce? I think I introduced 5 to the Liquor Control.
Four
and
or 5, yep.
Yeah, and
Same
I'm
ones,
only
though?
4. Yeah, four of the 5. I'm not introducing one of them because it wasn't really relevant.
Okay. But those are the ones that were done in 2006 when the town approved the reconstruction of the road?
2016.
2016, okay.
I don't know that the town actually approved it then, but that's when the plans were done. In other words, it may have been approved before that.
But it's up through CC then?
CC?
CC, thank you.
I have 3 sheets that show, this comes from the town's GIS system, and it shows Mountain Road, and it shows how steep Mountain Road is along the sides, the cliffs that go down.
So it's a topography map from GIS?
Yes. We have a front page article from the Journal Inquirer dated Thursday, September 9th. Many wells tainted by road salt.
And on Mountain Road in Summers?
No.
Or just generic?
Just generic.
In Tolland and anywhere?
I haven't read the article in a while.
All right, but that's going to be EE?
Correct.
Thank you.
We have an email from Jen Roy dated June 22nd from Mark Murdoch. And this is a concern that my client has, which is what are events that are going on out there. So the email says, Jen, we have the following bookings, but I am hesitant to call all of these events since an event is not clearly defined to us. We have activities that are public or private, small or large, indoor or outdoor, personal or recreational, paid or free, music or no music, alcohol free or catered. What constitutes an event? And if the importance of this goes to the mixing of these permits again and what's going on out there. And it goes to the fact that this is an outdoor recreation facility, and as an accessory use, that these other uses should not be overtaking the use as an outdoor recreation facility. And unfortunately, the applicant, by his own admission, doesn't know what constitutes an event. So in addition, even though the following are currently scheduled, this is by no means a complete list, as we will continue to fill in our schedule based upon our availability and interest. And there's 3 weddings listed here in October, among a couple of other things, including a business meeting indoors. Now, I don't think that's what that special use permit was even for. So this is a huge concern when you're mixing a new use of the facility on top of the existing use. We have two fairly grainy black and white photographs.
Separate or together?
Well, they can be together. They're different. One's coming. Well, let me ask Mr. Pryor. Did you take these photographs?
Yes.
And what do they depict?
The one here on the left is going downhill, looking at the sight line, and this one's going uphill towards the Worthington Pond entrance.
Okay. Again, looking towards the sight line?
Yes.
Okay.
And George, just to clarify, just so everybody understands, but I'm assuming downhill means they're going to the west and uphill is going towards the east?
Yep. Jay, is that right?
Yes.
Thank you. We don't believe that this application meets the plan of conservation and development. And so we're introducing the letter regarding the plan of conservation and development, the welcome letter, and the introduction, which talks about the purpose of the plan of conservation and development. And it's supposed to protect important resources, guide appropriate development, and address community needs. It's supposed to enhance the quality of life of current and future residents. Mr. Pryor, do you believe that this winery is going to enhance the quality of your life in Summers?
No way. And prior to the record.
I have a series of emails here.
Is this one record?
Sure.
Then leave the clip on it.
I have to see what they are. I could just turn them in, but I know that Mr. Clark probably has a question as to what they are. So we have emails that pertain to sheet flow over the road and the filling of a drainage ditch when the vineyard was planted. We have emails regarding potentially some blasting, and we have emails comparing this project to the Eastman project. And we'll just put them all in. We have an article. What?
Double I.
Double I. We have an article from.
Just for how many emails were there?
Sound like 4 or 5.
More than 10.
More than 10?
More than 10?
I think when it's back and forth, they're.
And just the date time frame, George, were those all prior to the adoption of the new regulations or after the adoption of the new regulations?
There seems to be about
I think there were probably
Well, 7 sets, but there's more than
Right.
7 emails on. I mean, there's more than one email on
That's
each
okay. They
set.
speak for themselves. You can go forward.
I have an article here from the North Central News, Hope Springs Eternal for Summers Vineyard, and it's an article about Worthington Pond Vineyard, but what's interesting is the Murdochs talk about Cassidy Hill and Brignole, both of those vineyards helping them out, and so along, well, we'll call that, that's double J.
Right.
Then we have, with that, those 2 vineyards
Can you
are
just
both.
I'm sorry, George, I don't mean to interrupt, but just for the record, because you're marking an exhibit, clarify what the date of that article is so we don't get them confused with everything else.
I don't know that there's a date on there.
It's not.
What does the title of it say?
Hope Springs Eternal for Summers
Springs
Vineyard.
Eternal? That's fine, thank you.
We have planning and zoning minutes from the town of East Granby dated March 10th. This concerns the issues out at Brignole's Winery. And we have a JI article dated September 14, 2021. Neighbors of Coventry Winery complain about speeding and too many people at events. So those are the 2 wineries that the
these
Murdochs, yeah, let's make them separate.
So, let's see.
Is that the article that references Attorney Landolino, the one about Brignall? Which one is that article?
I think so. It's actually minutes, not an article. It's the minutes of the East Granby, or the Granby.
East Granby
East
Planning and
Granby.
Zoning Commission minutes, March 10th, 2020.
Again, I don't know what's the other relevant, but go ahead.
Double K. And the next one. So what's this?
That's
September
the
14th. 2021.
right.
JI article on Coventry Winery.
That's double L.
Yes.
Have the field card for the 359 Mountain Road property from the Summers Assessor's Office.
What's 359 Mountain Road?
The property that we're, the
Okay.
winery
Just
property.
making sure.
Yep. Yep, fair enough. We have an application signed by Karen Murdoch, State of Connecticut. Well, it's not an application, I guess. The State of Connecticut Department of Public Health Public Water System Screening Form. And it was signed by Karen Murdoch on September 3rd, 2021, signed by Steve Jacobs on 9/7/21. And in it, it says the property previously used as banquet facilities for public gatherings. We have the Town of Summers Board of Selectmen minutes from September 17, 2020.
9/17/2020.
Right. A Journal Enquirer article dated March 4th, 21, wineries at center of debate on revising summer zoning rules.
Same objection.
A letter from Harold R. Cummings, formerly an attorney at law at the firm of Cummings, Lanza and Pernhagen, dated October 13th, 2004, regarding concerns with sanitation, food preparation, and food service at Worthington Pond.
It was 2004.
2004. Same. He's no longer with us.
Right. Emails from Ken Pryor to Jen Roy regarding Worthington Pond indoor events. The last one is dated 1/19/21. There's a string of them.
Double R.
Yes.
Another email from Ken Pryor, last one dated 9/18/21 to Jen Roy. It has some of the history of Worthington Pond and some of the issues.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the date on that, Joe. I'm sorry.
Sure.
9/17.
9/18/21. We have a State of Connecticut application for manufacturer of spirits or manufacturer of beer or manufacturer farm winery. It's the Murdoch's application for their liquor permit. And the interesting item of note here is type of live entertainment. No is checked. But according to their special use permit application, apparently there will be live entertainment, whether it's acoustic, guitarists, or musicians, or what have you. We have the defendant's brief, the defendant being the Zoning Commission of the Town of Summers, filed by Attorney Carl Landolina in the tent case, the Worthington Pond Farm LLC versus Zoning Commission, dated February 17, 2005.
Correct.
I believe it's irrelevant.
And we have the intervening defendant's brief in opposition to the plaintiff's complaint. This was filed by Attorney Cummings, and this was dated February 21st, 2005. And I just need to go through my notes quickly, and then I think I'm done.
Do you want me to read the public comments
Yes.
while we wait?
Yes, there were some public comments that were forwarded over or received by email or carried into the town
Emails.
hall, emails that Jennifer's going to go over.
Okay, we have Kenneth Quello, 605 Stafford Road. He does not support the proposed application for 359 Mountain Road. The revised regulations are substandard and incomplete.
Jay, is that a new letter? Didn't he already have a letter previously in the original public hearing that we started months ago?
He has.
He had a number, and he testified a couple times too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to read all of these emails into the record. I've received, this was received today,
So
December
these are all recent
13th.
ones?
These are all recent.
Okay.
The first one started September 20th for our first night of public hearings, and
Thank you.
most of them are from September into November.
So I think some of them may already be in the record or part of it, at least.
Well, I'm just going to,
Yeah, that's fine. I get it.
so that's Kenneth Quello opposes, Kashmir Cruzel, 43 Brookford Drive, Summers, supports the application. Beth Frechette, Chairman of the Economic Development Committee, supports the application. Michelle Hoyt, former Summers resident, lives in Stafford, supports the application. Victoria Clark, CCR and Select Homes, local business owner and resident, supports the application. I already printed that one, same person. Kevin and Nancy Boudreau, 71 Franklin Woods Drive, support the application. Same person, I think. Bob Garlick, 52 Juniper Hill Drive, supports the application. Jennifer Phillips, 17 Gulf Road, supports the application. And I guess one other thing to enter into the record, I have an email dated November 23rd from Attorney Clark, Sean Clark, with just the documentation and information regarding the applicant and their Secretary of the State filing for their proper name. So I will mark that W.
There was a question, I think, at that point in time, but I just wanted.
You asked me to put it in the record.
Yes, and I did.
So it's
Just to clarify.
double W.
That goes back to what we talked about at the last meeting where we postponed.
Regarding confirmation, it supports
fine.
the revised application.
Just making sure I knew what it was.
Correct. So that's, let's see, double W again.
Okay, I'm just going to sum up. I'm going to sum up all of the deficiencies in the plan, and then I have a copy of this for each commission member and a copy to enter into the record and a copy for Mr. Clark. But here we go. We're going to hit the highlights. It's not a farm. Tasting rooms are not allowed by regulations. Only one primary use is allowed, and outdoor recreation is the admitted primary use. They want to give up that primary use and that outdoor recreation and those uses that go with it, they can do that, and they can apply to become a farm winery. The parking does not comply with the regulations. They probably need 153 spaces, and they show 30. It doesn't meet the landscape requirements. It doesn't meet the tree requirements. The spaces don't meet the dimensional requirements. You have to be concerned about any sort of dirt gravel parking lot along with the roadways for dust. The lines aren't going to be striped. There's no lighting plan. There's no drainage plan. There's no E&S plan. There's no septic plan. There's no proof that the septic was properly installed. There's no as-built. There's no refuse management plan. Dumpsters must be located on the plan and enclosed and screened per your regulations. Composting areas must be located on the plan and screened. There's no landscape plan. The tent's not allowed per the court decision. Nothing in the regulations permits tents. Nothing in the regulations allows parties, receptions, etc. Accessory buildings must be located on the rear half of the front yard of the property. The sugar shack is non-conforming and cannot be made more so by an increased use. Accessory buildings on a farm must be more than 100 feet from the property line. The traffic study is incomplete. It doesn't account for the tent. It doesn't account for other uses. It doesn't account for speed and sight lines. There's no sightline profile plan. The sight lines are inadequate and unsafe. The driveway, I'll get back to that. No required chemical storage plan for groundwater protection. No sidewalks on site for pedestrian safety. The proposal does not comply with the plan of conservation and development. This is interesting. We'll get back to that. Let me mark that, because I want to keep rolling. Plans must be resubmitted to the Planning Commission due to significant changes on the plans. The plans do not meet special use permit regulations. The application requires a detailed statement describing how the special use criteria in section 9.4.e are addressed. Well, they can't do that because they don't address those. The plan is deficient. It requires approvals from local and state agencies having jurisdiction over the application. And we skipped over there's a couple of approvals that are necessary. They're in the regulations. I don't remember what they are, but they're there. The applicant must provide plans and reports which describe the proposed development's conformance with the requirements of the regulations. They don't comply. They can't do that. It's not in harmony with the purposes and intent of the regulations. This is a residential zone. My client lives there. Other people live there. They should be allowed the peaceful use and enjoyment of their property. The Commission must determine that the plans are in conformance with the regulations, including the fact that the site plan is in conformance with the regulations. There are negative impacts on the enjoyment, usefulness, and value of nearby property. These are all part of your special use permit requirements. It has to reasonably harmonize with the character of the neighborhood. It does not do that. It's not a residence. No care and attention taken to protect the adjacent area. There's no valid public purpose for the proposed facility. You know, we may need a lot of things in this town, but a winery isn't one of them. There's no public purpose, no valid public purpose. It doesn't meet the requirements to balance the public purpose with the adverse impact to the adjacent area and the general welfare of the community. On the site plan, we've noted a lot of deficiencies of things not being put there, including the Vittle station, and there's improper notice regarding the tent, and I believe still with the applicant owner. And let me just briefly explain that. None of the notices talk about a tent. And a tent is much different than a building because a tent is not enclosed. It's a tent covering. It's typically not enclosed. It might have some plastic walls, but sound travels from that tent. And that's much different than putting a tasting room inside a building. So there was no notice of that given to anybody that it might be a tent. I don't think, and I'm just going to mention it, and I don't expect you to agree, disagree, whatever. It's a legal question, but I don't think you can take an improper application that was filed like it was with the improper owner and just amend it. I think you have to start over. That's just my personal opinion, and I'm just throwing it out there. It's on my list. Now, I have two other things on the list that we didn't talk about, and one is the driveway. It's only 15 feet wide. There's an awful lot of people that could be on there on that property at any one time. Mr. Ussery is the expert, and I know that I'm going to ask him this question, and of course he's going to, hit it right out of the park, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because we don't have an engineer over here on our side. But 15 feet wide driveway, 20 feet's permitted. Is that safe for emergency vehicles when you have, 200-300 people potentially on the property?
For the record, J.R. Russo. I actually have it at a little wider than 15 feet based on what we surveyed, but I guess to answer your question is that at 15 feet wide, that's more than adequate to accommodate any emergency vehicles to get in and out of the facility.
Okay. Now, 6.11 of the regulations states that 6.116 states that in a residential district, 6.11 states sale of alcoholic beverages subject to state liquor commission control and restrictions may be permitted by the zoning commission by special use permit in accordance with the following. And 6.116 says residential district. So provided that the entrance is far enough from a church or a public school, sale of alcoholic liquors for consumption on the premises is permitted in residential districts as follows. There are two ways you can sell alcohol in a residential district. A club under a club permit, or at a public golf course or golf center on a restaurant permit, under a restaurant permit. Those are the only two ways. Under your regulations, you can't have a farm winery on a property that doesn't include a club or a public golf course. And that's not here. And that is, I believe, my final comment. Thank you.
George, did you say that you were giving us a copy of that statement?
And each
So I
one of
can
us
mark
our
it.
own
Each
copy?
one, your own. Yes, thank you.
So I'm going to mark that double X.
Oh, I'd make a triple X.
Double
X.
X.
Double X.
Yes.
It doesn't have my editorial comments, though. It only has the bullet points.
Oh, so it's
That's
just
better
short.
than that.
It's
It
short.
was the bridge version.
I didn't want to write a brief.
George, you're all set, you done?
I'm done. Well, reserving the right to comment, but
No, I mean, the applicant gets the final word.
no, that's not how it works.
You have this thing where you feel like you always have to get the last word in, and I don't think that's appropriate. I think we said in the beginning of this hearing that the applicant would present its application, the opponents would get an opportunity to respond, and then we would get the final word to respond and comment on what they provided. And if we're not going to follow those rules, then I think we should know that going into it. George.
You said that. Those were your rules. Those aren't
George,
real
George,
rules.
Really? It's like
It's late.
Yeah.
9:20.
Well, it's almost,
I reserve
3
the
hours
right.
and 20 minutes in.
I reserve the right
Enough.
to comment if necessary.
Fine. I would be surprised if you didn't.
Thank you.
I'm just going to make a couple of points, and I
can you
really,
just state your name? I
Sure,
know.
Attorney Sean Clark on behalf of the Murdochs. I'm going to stand because we've been sitting for a very, very long period of time. First of all, I want to thank you guys for your patience. I know this has been long and arduous. As I mentioned before tonight, I know this has been going on really all intents and purposes since January of 2020, and I know you all put in a lot of time into this. The application itself, in terms of what the Murdochs are seeking, is permitted on the regulations. I find it hard to believe that Attorney Schober in his last comment said that it's not permitted in a residential district, but what section 6.11 says is that you can, in accordance with state liquor control commission regulations, you can have those things in town, but they have to fall under the different categories: retail permit, retail sale, on-site consumption, grocery, George will probably disagree with me. We talk about residential districts, unless it's a farm, winery, brewery, distillery under Section 8. And that was specifically written into the regulations as part of the change. And you're intimately familiar with the regulations as they were adopted and as we talked about earlier with respect to 6.12. And this commission clearly knows that legislatively they were done at the same time and approved at the same time earlier in the year. One thing is clear, and I do appreciate the constructive feedback that Attorney Schoburn's clients have provided, but we may disagree on a lot of the issues, okay? I understand Mr. Pryor's concern. He lives across the street, okay? But it's been suggested before this commission, and he's testified about the birds and the deer and all the other, uses of the property over the time that he's lived across the street. And I can appreciate that. But the question is whether or not the applicant complies with the regulations to have this facility in a residential zone. And I know I've commented on this before, but the town of Somers, not unlike a lot of towns in certain sections of Connecticut, farms are located in residential areas. They're located where people live. I was just in Montana, okay, for about 10 days. And the closest person to where I was in Montana, staying in a bunkhouse, was 5 miles down the road. The closest grocery store was 35 miles down the road, okay? So we have to look at what do we have here. We have farms in residential areas. We have other things that take place in residential areas. We have farm stands. We have all these other things that take place. But farms in Connecticut are going to be in those residential areas because, as with most development, the houses that have popped up along Mountain Road, just like the Pryor's houses, they've all been developed in areas where there was open space. You can live in the country, you can live there. But in this situation, we've heard even Mr. Ussery say there were cows there, there's haying going on. You used to do maple syrup there, and now they're going to do a winery there. Those are all consistent with farm uses that have all been done in residential zones and are consistent with the plan of conservation and development. Where I take issue with this is that Attorney Schober would suggest there's no recourse. Well, let's look at it. I mean, he's had every opportunity to speak at every hearing about every change to the amendments to the regulation, and so have we. And we may just agree to disagree in terms of the effect of that and before this commission. But the general consensus of the people in town and the people on this board approve the change of the regulation to allow and permit farm wineries. But the suggestion is that there's no recourse whatsoever. And I know Attorney Schober, I don't know the exact exhibit number, but he introduced a notice of violation about lighting issue. The lights have been there for a long time, okay? But he's exercised his right for recourse. The recourse, as with most zoning violations in the town, after something gets approved, even though we don't have approval with this yet, is to say, hey, the lights are affecting me. So what does he do? He contacts Ms. Roy. Ms. Roy looks at it, goes out there and says, hey, maybe there's an issue with lighting, and then there's recourse. Okay? So the same thing is going to be true with respect to this application. If he doesn't like what's going on, I'm going to venture a guess that he's going to contact Ms. Roy and he's going to say they shouldn't be doing this, they shouldn't be doing that, or it's not consistent with the conditions that this commission may or may not put on this special permit. And you have the right to do that. So if there's something that you think is either missing or can be enhanced or can be improved, the application can be submitted, discussed amongst yourselves, and you can say, hey, we think you should address lighting better along the roadway, and we're going to make that a condition of the application. That's where your discretion comes into play. That's where your common sense comes into play, okay? But to say that there's no recourse after having all this opportunity to be heard and filing a complaint and filing other complaints regarding this, filing other lawsuits against this in 2004, it's hard to say that there's no recourse. The recourse is what the regulations provide already. They apply to everybody else in the town of Somers, and there shouldn't be anything different like that here. Okay? But I just wanted to be clear that there is recourse. There is an avenue for that. Just a couple more minor points here that I think are important to point out. Sorry, I was going through this long list of exhibits here. I do appreciate the comments that have been made by them. However, you have to look at some of them and say, is there really opinion testimony from an expert that supports that. So while Mr. Pryor can go out and measure the distance of what he believes the sight line, that's really just his opinion. It's not an expert opinion that says whether or not the roadway actually complies and comports with regulations and with standards and with everything else of that nature. He can talk about sheet flow. Does that mean he's a traffic expert, a water expert, a water flow expert, a hydrogeologist? There's nothing that can support that. If they really wanted to introduce data that would show that, they could have had their own traffic expert. They could have their own sheet flow expert. They could have rainwater specialist experts. But the issue really, as it pertains to this particular situation, to sum it up, is the 2 accidents that he talked about, they're unfortunate. But there's no nexus between them occurring because there was an activity that occurred at Worthington Pond. There was an accident on the road because that's the roadway that exists. We had testimony from other people that talked about accidents that took place at the intersection of Mountain Road and the main road down at the bottom of the street. Turnpike Road. But that had nothing to do with this particular facility. So my point is, when you discuss this amongst yourselves, ask yourself, was this something that was just a generic opinion, or was this just something that was, hey, I don't want this to happen, I don't want this in my backyard, so I'm going to say that it's problematic, but there's really no specific data to support that. Okay? Last but not least, the special use permit from 2004 is really kind of a red herring in this situation. The regulations, for example, and this is where I started to allude to this earlier, even as to farms, okay? There's different regulations that apply to farms. If we wanted to put excessive amounts of vehicles on a farm, right? The regulations, your current regulations, right, under 3.3AC say there's no limit in terms of vehicles on a farm. No limits, right? They say that if we need to get a special use permit because of waste, it talks about manure waste, and it talks that we have to have 100 cubic yards of waste. I have a garden that's 4 acres that we do. We probably generate 5 yards of compost every year. It's not a lot. Not even enough to fill this whole area where your table is. And it's all vegetables, it's apples, it's all that kind of stuff. Garlic. Garlic generates a lot of waste. Okay? But it's not that much. And the regulations can say that you need a special permit application just for that one thing. Everything else for farms, generally speaking, is done with a zoning approval permit or an application for a zoning permit through the zoning officer. So farms are encouraged in summers. This is going to be a farm. It is a farm. It's being used for that. And it's being used, including the buildings, the tasting room, all the other buildings that would be accessory to that. That's all part of the definition of a farm. So I don't know if the Murdochs have any other comments, but I think generically those are the things that I think that were important just to highlight. And again, most importantly, I know it's late. I'm hungry too. I appreciate your time and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
I have just 2 or 3 comments. They won't be long. George Schober. Mr. Clark's absolutely right. We need a traffic expert here. The commission needs to have a traffic expert. There were accidents that were testified to. Yes, Mountain Road is a dangerous road. Anyone who drives Mountain Road knows that. And that's why we need the traffic expert. We need the sight lines. We need a sight line profile plan. We need to determine if there's adequate sight lines for people coming in and people pulling out. I think it's actually safer at night because at least you can see the headlights than it probably is in the daytime. This isn't consistent with a residential use. Having this facility as it exists now is not consistent, and with the winery, it will be even less consistent because it's more people coming in and coming out and disturbing my client's peaceful enjoyment of the use of his property. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Anybody else have any more comments? No.
No, I have none. It's not appropriate
No.
anyway.
Neither do I.
Where are we time-wise?
You have 12 days left. to close the public hearing. And that will use up all of the extension time.
I
And
understand.
then we still have time for a decision.
And clock starts over once we close the public hearing.
Correct.
We have
but you-
65 days to arrive at a decision if necessary.
Correct. I'm just reminding you that you have,
Okay,
that,
I
that's
thought we
what's
were
left.
already at the end.
I thought we were close. Well, we have 12 days on the,
If you want to keep the public hearing.
and then we have 65 days after we close to make a decision.
Does anyone have anything else that they are looking for or that we are waiting for that would cause us to want to keep the public hearing open longer? We have everything we think we need from Steve Jacobs.
I believe so. That's up to you to determine. You have his report, his review.
Yeah, no, I read it.
Yeah.
I don't believe Steve Jacobs would have anything further to comment on.
Okay. That answers my question.
I mean, some of the things that were brought up,
Were there things that were brought up that caused you to ask, would need more information?
no.
Yeah.
No.
Paige?
Yeah, so, not very specifically to this activity, a
Okay.
60-person activity. One-person activity.
Is there anything here that came up that you don't think could be satisfied in conditions of approval or refusal?
Well, you know, that was always our take, that we would, you know, make adjustments at these meetings on the special use permit. So, you know, I think once we get to the discussion time for us, you know, we can make decisions on what we need to do conditionally or
Mm-hmm.
additional things they can ask, that we can ask for. Yeah, I think it could be a long list.
Yeah, me too. I think there were some valid things that have been brought up that need consideration, but I think they get covered in conditions.
I agree. I mean, I only have a few things, but, you know.
So are we in
Things-
agreement that at this time we can
We can
close the
close,
public
I don't
hearing?
think I don't know if there's anything else that anybody wants to put forward into this application.
Oh, I think they're all done.
I think so too.
I
So-
did want to answer, you had a question, you didn't answer it. You asked about water many months ago, and I did some research. We said, you know, we figured, and we think it's far more than we use. But the word is 10 gallons of water per every gallon of wine. And
Wow.
that would be, but you use mostly water for rinsing, right? And so rinsing the tanks you
Oh,
collect,
okay.
really not, that's it.
I was going to say,
At
it'd
our
be pretty
peak
diluted.
capacity, and that's not for 5 years from now, that would, you figure 10,000 gallons of wine, that would make us 100,000 gallons of water usage
A year.
a year. The average, according to the U.S. Department of, consumer, the average household goes through 100,000 gallons of water a year for an average of 3 people. So basically, we could use about the equivalent of 1 hour a year.
So you're not figuring you're going to drain an aquifer.
So to answer your question.
What about the tasting room activity and the water use there?
Well, it would be just normal toilets usage.
And
And that would be
a couple hundred thousand gallons is not a lot of
We are
use.
so far over capacity, so far beyond the expected capacity that it will never be used to what we predicted, like we expect to use it.
So I mean, I feel comfortable closing the public hearing.
Then I
I'm
make a
not,
motion to close the public hearing at this time.
I'll second that.
any further discussion?
We've
All in-
said enough.
All in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
At 9:35 PM. So I don't know if we want to get into discussion tonight.
No.
No. Okay, so let's make a motion to adjourn this special.
When you said table.
What?
Well, we'll get, yeah.
No.
Okay. So we're gonna make a motion to table the
Joe's wanted to
discussion.
leave for an hour.
I gotta go. I got a little curl at home. We gotta
Yeah,
make,
so moved.
okay,
I have a wife.
table, yeah, well, I got a
Table discussion,
babysitter, I
moved
gotta.
that.
So we're
Table
tabling discussion
Well, no.
till our next meeting. Till our next meeting.
On this, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
okay.
But we should approve
What?
meeting dates for next.
You already did
We
that.
did that at our
another-
last,
And this is a special meeting, so
yeah,
we're
we
just.
can't do anything. So
we're just
who made a
tabling
motion to
discussion.
adjourn?
I did.
Carl
she
did,
I
Paige
seconded.
seconded it. Oh, Paige made the motion to adjourn.
No,
Paige
Carl
made a
did.
motion to table. the
Paige made a
discussion.
motion to table the discussion.
Carl seconded it.
Second.
Carl seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Now
Adjourn.
Carl
Motion to adjourn.
made a motion to
Dan's asleep
adjourn.
at the
Dan
switch.
Dan's gonna second it. Dan,
I'll second it.
all in favor? Aye. Okay, so we are adjourning at 9:36, and I'm going. I'm leaving right now.
Okay, bye.
Use the door, not
Thanks.
the window. Too.
Thank you, you too. Hey,
John, were you out in Montana hunting?
That was part of it. It was a veterans trip.
Oh, cool.
So we had a disabled vet, female, and so it was supposed to be a fly fishing and hunting thing.
Yeah.